Hello all. Sadly, our good friend, Mr. Sotek, is not with us. I, however, am hale and healthy, which, if you know me, is probably a big surprise. I'm here and ready for an Ask Me Anything. Slightly unprepped, not really ready. Today was going to be all about witch hunters, but before we dive into some sort of loose preamble, can you hear me? Is everything coming through clear? Because I don't have Sotek on the other side to say, yeah, your mic's coming in okay. And I'm asking because just before I went live, everything went down at this end. Just went, nah, I don't want to work at all. So I've been panicking for the last couple of moments getting everything ready. So I would like to say an enormous thank you to Todd. Todd, you kick ass, for clarifying that I am coming through. And for everyone else who also did the same, like Mickey and Lucas and Swedgen and everyone else, thank you so much. Right, so today we were discussing witch hunters. We were going to dive into a much more complicated topic than I think many people realize. Witch hunters are often perceived as this Sigmarite faction that work out of the Empire and that's it. But witch hunters are a much more complicated affair than that alone. And we had lots that we were going to discuss. That's now going to be happening next Sunday at 4 p.m. UK, not today. Today, instead, I'm doing a cheeky We Ask Me Anything just because, hey, I'm doing nothing this afternoon. In fact, I'm going to reach down here, grab myself a can of whatever this is. Apparently, it's a can of Pepsi Max. I'm going to get myself a nice wee drink, and I'm going to dive in. Now, before I dive in, there's a few things I'm going to say. As always, with Ask Me Anythings. This is the first one I'm doing under the Lorebeards tag, you might notice, because Lorebeards will occasionally be doing their own Ask Me Anythings. This is my first one under the Lorebeards tag, and much like all Ask Me Anythings, if you want to ask me a question, make sure you tag me in the comments. If you don't tag me in the comments, I won't know that you're talking to me. So if you just ask a random question like, hey, Andy, why is your beard so disheveled today? To which I will reply something along the lines of, because I couldn't be asked trimming it. Well, hey, we're done. But if you just write that, I won't answer it. But if you write at Andy Law or at Lorebeards or at LAWhammer, depending on which channel you're currently watching on, then in that instance, you can definitely get an answer. As always, as well, if anyone's bringing in a super chat like the marvelous Gneevil here, who I still have no idea if I'm pronouncing his name correctly. You should tell me at some point, Gneevil. I will always take those first because if someone's willing to throw money at the LAWhammer channel and well, help us buy more mics and similar things to that, then I'm absolutely going to take that first. So let me just take a quick drink, say cheers, and get ready to go. There we go. Oh, hiccup. Excuse me. There. I can do something that my wife finds exceedingly annoying. Let me just start with this instead of the question. I'll get to that in just a moment. When I was about 15, 16, I used to get hiccups a lot. Bugged the tits off me. I don't know why. I was apparently going through some form of puberty nonsense. I got a lot of hiccups. So I decided I didn't want hiccups anymore. Felt where they were in my body, and I stopped them. That's it. I just went, there we go. That's them stopped. Didn't take much. My wife gets hiccups all the time. She hates the fact that I can just stop them at will. That's it. It's not a really big fact. But as Andy facts go, it's an amusing one. I can stop hiccups at will. Alrighty, let's dive in. Gneevil. Raw. Apparently got a little bit of a frog in my throat there. Let me take another drink. Raw in Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 4e says that humans can only learn one good lore. How does this work for PCs who start off as hedge witches, then join a college? So it's one arcane lore, note that, which and witchery is separate. Now, there's a reason that this rule's in there. It's because, if I'm being as blunt as I can be, there's an editing error. The original version of the rules separated witchery, arcane color magic, dark magic, and chaos magic into 4 different magic types. And you can see that division still inside the magic chapter because you can see that they're still broken up into that. However, there was a simplification made in the talents after submission where several things were just messed around and changed. They weren't ported over into the magic section as well. So how does this work? It works like this. You get your witch magic. Say, for example, I'm a hedge witch and I've learned hedge witchery. I then get picked up by the colleges. Hello, colleges. They drag this witch in and they say, you are now going to be learning proper, let's say, amethyst magic. So you shave your head and you become an amethyst wizard. From that point onwards, you now learn amethyst spells. You shouldn't be using your hedge magic spells or your petty magic spells because they are illegal. And of course, no wizard would ever use that other type of magic that they can. Now, it's also worth noting that several NPCs in Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay have this as a standard. This is common from all the way back from Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 2nd edition up to the current edition. Take, for example, in 2nd edition, inside the Hedge Witch rules, I'll use this because it's the example given. There was a character called Marcus Fisher. Now, Marcus Fisher was a hedge witch, a very talented young hedge witch, one of the blessed few, one of those who are blessed by the gods according to hedge witch traditions, and a very skilled one who at a young age moved into the colleges to infiltrate them, and then learned grey magic. He was also very skilled at that, and he was still a fully practicing hedge witch, and on top of that, also a grey wizard. So the rules completely allowed for that. The plans for Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 4 when I was running things, they got changed by others. Their plans were different, not better, not worse, just different. The plans for those 4 different magic types was to make it clear how each one of them worked in practice when we moved on to a magic book. There was a book that we had in my schedule called Realms of Sorcery, and in there it was going to show that all witchery came along with the possible point of corruption. You could be corrupted by your magic whenever you used it because you weren't a properly trained wizard who had been taken through all the ways to ensure that doesn't happen. Now you might go, but surely all these old traditions of magic, they're properly trained by their masters down to apprentices, hidden away from witch hunters and the like. And you're right, they are, but that doesn't mean that the magic they're using is entirely safe. There's a reason that Teclis came along, looked at most of the magic the humans were doing and went, yeah, no, you don't want to be doing it like that. You illusionists over there, and you necromancers, and you demonologists, you need to change what you're doing. You an illusionist, let's move you over here and give you grey magic, and we'll show you how this works properly. You demonologist, you come over here. I reckon you could probably channel Heish. We'll make you light wizards, and we'll also not let you do all that crazy shit that you were doing before, because that brings taint. And you over there, you necromancers, bad boys, and girls, and others, let's take you over here, and we will teach you amethyst magic. So all of these different types of magic got made cleaner by Teclis. And the original intent was the casting number of the spell showed how much potential corruption there is. Now, for those of you that know your Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay rules, you'll know that that means hedge witches who all of their basic spells are casting number 0 don't carry taint. There's a reason they're one of the blessed few, as I mentioned earlier. I've really got something stuck in my throat here. I had some muesli this morning, so I'm going to blame that. Probably a tiny bit just sitting in my throat. Go away. So, that's how it's meant to have worked. The rules as intended were each one of the different types would be used in different ways. And there would be actual taint for using various potentially dangerous spells that would manifest as corruption, and this corruption would eventually manifest as potentially mutations or arcane marks that were rather nasty. The Dar arcane marks are particularly nasty. If you've ever seen the afflictions that you get from Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 1st edition, that was the plan that was going to be going on there. So that's a pretty long, convoluted way of saying we should be able to do it. And if you channel more than one wind, it also results in corruption of your human. It's not an elf lie. It does actually happen. There's a reason that most of the wizards that have channeled more than one wind corrupt and eventually fall to chaos. Biofoot, what do you think is up with the Booties Super Void? Now, I don't know. And just because you can ask me doesn't mean I'll have a good answer. I'm very aware of the Booty Super Void and what exactly is going up there. And I think my best answer for this would be the real one, which is I'm fascinated and I want to know more. And the second that somebody, I don't know, like Neil deGrasse Tyson or something like that pops up and says something, that'd be great, but he has yet to do so. So moving down through my comments here, let's move down to Chaotic Monkey. Thank you very much. If there was an equivalent to 40k blanks in fantasy, yep, How would they be perceived in the setting? Would they have the same aura of unease blanks have having negative connections to the 8 winds? So probably yes, if they were the same. There would be that aura of unease. They would be rejecting the winds of magic. But you've got to remember that in 40k and Warhammer handles the aether, the warp, magic, psychic powers differently. In 40k, you are channeling warp energies directly from the warp. There's no handy gate of chaos throwing out winds of magic. In the Warhammer world, the warp is very much away from the material realm. There is no easy crossover space where you can just draw in warp energies. The winds of magic are normally the only way that you can cast magic. And these winds of magic that permeate and move their way across the world are very different to how warp energy manifests. And warp energy and psychic blanks, for those of you who don't know, they're the ones that basically are like anti-psychers, the exact opposite. They repulse warp energies, is a very simplistic way of putting it. If we had something similar in Warhammer, we discussed this over in our Chaos tier list stream, one way that it could manifest in Warhammer. Go watch that stream, it's properly crazy, but we had a lot of fun with our Chaos tier list stream. You'll find that on, I think that's on the LAWhammer channel and Lorebeards at the moment, so you can go watch that just now. It would be a very different situation and it would be anti-magical, and I think that would be fun. They aren't necessarily going to have the negative connections. There's different ways that we could probably handle it, but I think that probably if we were doing this, we would. And the way that Warhammer would probably cover it as it currently stands is either through the route that we discussed in the Chaos stream, or alternatively as a mutation. It would work there quite well. Czar94, I'm playing Baldur's Gate 3 right now. Nice. Andy, should I free Orpheus or trust the Emperor? Oh, man. That is a choice for you, Czar. I would not like to step in on your gameplay. Oh, man. Yeah. I know what I want to say, but I'm not gonna. For sake of spoilers, I'm going to say go with where your heart says to go. That's possibly not the best answer in the world. Right, let's scroll back and see if we can find some questions at me. Niceguard, I did a super chat the Witch Hunter episode. You're welcome to reply to it here if you want to. Did you? Now, I can't access it from here. I can go take a check. I'll look at that one, actually, Nice. So I'm going to go take a check. Oh, apparently I've got sound coming out all over the place now. Go away. Get out of it. There we go. That's what happens when you go over to YouTube without a plan to do so. So let me see if I can find that while we're going. I trust it was about witch hunters, and if it was a good thing about witch hunters, I might leave it for the witch hunter stream. If it is something that is potentially controversial and I can have a take on, I am so 100% doing that. Let's have a quick look. Can I see it? Oh, it's not letting me see the chat here. Sadly, I can't see the chat here. So, really sorry, I can't see it. If that one's disappeared, Nice, just tell us over in the Lorebeards Discord channel and I'll get it sorted. Or next week on the Witch Hunter stream and I'll get it sorted so it's not lost. But I can't see it at this end at the moment. So, moving down to Draymond. Lorebeards, first question since I'm playing now. Have you played Hades 2 yet? No, I haven't. And I would like it, and I haven't got around to it yet. And the reason I haven't is because I'm weirdly anal with games. I'm on fixed tram lines through my life that sometimes I can't get off. And I've yet to finish Hades in a way that I'm happy with, so I don't want to move on to Hades 2 yet. Now, have I played Hades for more than... when was the last time I played it? Like 2 years ago? Maybe longer? No. But does that mean I want to go Hades 2? Nope. I'm just not doing it. Exactly the same thing is happening with Silk Knight. I haven't played the second one of that either because I'm still halfway through playing the first one. And that one I have downloaded so I can go back to. But the answer to that one is a big, hard, yeah, nope, not yet. Right, moving down here to make sure that I don't miss any, because sometimes some come through over on Twitch and are missed, but I haven't seen one yet. So let's move over to Stephen Lucas. Need more Gur ER Crucible spells, or it's Beastman lore. Make horns grow where it should not. Roar spells, no polymorph hexes. Make up a reason. We don't need to make up a reason. Gur is... there's a fairly long, complicated answer for this that may take maybe too long, to the point that I might actually suggest to Sotek that we do a stream on some of the individual wins a little bit, because Gur is one of the ones that's both not had a lot written about it, but also has had a lot of thought put behind it too, some of which has manifested in things like the Realms of Sorcery book for Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 2nd edition. A lot of thought went into that one with Marianne. And Marian Verstaufer did a lot of chat behind the scenes about that. If you don't know Marian Verstaufer, MVS, as he was online at the time, and perhaps still is for all I know. MVS wrote things like the Liber Necris, the Liber Chaotica. He was deep down into GW's lore and really, really down into things like the Winds of Magic, the Lingua Prestantia. He wrote some of the original articles about the Lingua Prestantia. And there is a bunch of holes in Gur, things it can't do, in the same way there's holes in, say, Death Magic, things that it can't do. If we take a look at the lore of death, it doesn't allow you to summon up skeletons, because that's the lore of necromancy. It's a different area. Somewhat similarly, Gur doesn't allow you to polymorph others. It allows you to polymorph self, because it's the realm of other magical areas that require Dar to effectively push it through and make it do something else. So if you're just using the Amber Wind alone, it just doesn't work. You need to have more push to force it onto somebody else and make it stick. Now, you might immediately then go, then how does Morgiana Le Fay do it? Because she's a special character and she does things differently. She's mixing winds in a way that other spellcasters don't to create specific effects. She's not using a single wind, she's using multiple winds. And yes, she is using the Amber Wind in amongst that, because that is a core component, animalistic traits being manifested of that wind. So there's no real need to make up a reason. The real reason is because Gur doesn't do that. You need more to make the Winds of Magic cause somebody else to change into something else in that sort of fashion. Yeah, loosely, that's that. Battlefoot, while current AI sucks, I dispute that. I'd say a lot, arguably most AI sucks. Some absolutely doesn't. What good use cases do you see for something like that technology? Loads. I had a conversation about this on a panel at a con. And it it was an interesting one, because every single person at that con was, like myself, a somewhat lefty person. And the subject of AI, as it often does at con panels, came up because there is a great, almost need to vent about AI and what it's doing to everybody's jobs. And it is really crippling the games industry, and not just role-playing games, board games, et al. The video games industry is falling apart as people are just getting fired left, right, and center, and their jobs are being replaced by AI equivalents. This is going to be the norm for the next 5 to 10 years, as slowly but surely entire processes that used to be handled by humans are replaced by robots, with a human sitting on the top checking what the robot has done. This is happening. This is not something that we can pretend isn't. This is not something that can likely be legislated away anymore, because the world may, individual countries may try to make it not happen, but the world will, and the companies and the people who just employ folk are going to employ the folk that handle the AI rather than the folk that do it slow. This is sadly a norm to come. Now, will people continue to hire real artists, real writers? Yeah, of course. We're going to get curated bespoke material at all times, and lots of people will have stances. I refuse to do anything with AI, for example, because that's not what my company believes in. We believe in employing people to do this work. And that's going to happen. In the same way that there were people back in the fields during the turn of the 19th century that they said, we won't be using machines to harvest our crops. We will be doing this by hand because we believe in people labor. Out come the Luddites, or people who just didn't like photography because they preferred portraiture done by actual hand rather than by photograph. But photographs replaced painting in almost all media, except for the imaginative medias, where what's in front of you couldn't be changed. And now AI is doing largely the same across the board, but it's not just doing it in the creative industries. It's what we discuss most common because we're games people. It's being very usefully deployed in, say, for example, medicine, where there was a beautiful example of an AI pitched off against an entire group of doctors to detect cancers. The AI got 80, I think it was 86% of the cancers that were presented before it over so many hundreds of thousands of cases. The humans got around about 20 to 40%. And that is a good use of AI. There's no other way of putting it. Somewhat similarly, there was a similar test done for earthquakes and how many earthquakes were going in a particular area. The human scientists came in and went, there's this many doing this, which means this is the predictive model for what's going to happen in this area in the next set of earthquakes. The AI came in and by a measure of over 100 times marked off the humans as being utterly and completely wrong. And when the human scientists came in and looked at it and went, ah, shit, we were wrong. Just wrong. Completely wrong. We're heading towards an earthquake in this area. And we did not think that was the case. But the data is very clear because large data models, we as humans don't deal with particularly well. AI absolutely does. So when I was at this con, because I have sort of diverted a little bit, we were discussing the benefits of AI, much like this, and the very real downsides to AI. And I was on a panel where everyone was against it. I can't help myself. I find myself always wanting to bring balance to an argument. It's just where I come from. I'm a little bit spech. I don't like not saying the truth. Even when the truth is uncomfortable and horrible. So I try to use an analogy to make it clear. And I said that the problem wasn't the AI per se. The problem was how it was being used, and I gave some examples. And the example I'm going to use to finish off this one is Star Trek. In Star Trek, the computer in Star Trek is basically AI. Take a look at, for example, the holodeck. The holodeck is AI got mad, as many would see it. It takes anything from any time and it just spins it up and goes, there's the image, there's the video, there's the thing you can interact with. And whilst the vast majority of holodeck stuff we get inside Star Trek is very prim and proper, and yeah, I'm going back and I'm replaying something from, I don't know, the particular date in the past, and I'm living out some sort of crazy experience. We all know that much like the internet, it would be 90% porn. And it can recreate real people. It's got no ethics written into it. It's completely mad if you actually go back and watch how AI is represented and what it can do in the holodeck. And I said, this is our utopian future where our computers can do anything that we need from all information. The difference between us and them is not so much what the AI does. It's more about copyright. That's the problem. And we have copyright laws that protect creative people. You don't need that in a utopian future where there is no real money. Anyone can do whatever they wish. They express themselves artistically if they wish to. They can just sit and paint. They can express themselves artistically with an AI bot if they want and create things that other people can use. But there's no copyright in the future because everything's just open and there's no money. But there is in the real world here today. The problem is that we live in a capitalist society, and that's it. The AIs are, broadly speaking, fine. You think an AI piece of art is soulless? Great. But if you want to speed up the process as a computer game company, get it to spin up a soulless piece of AI and then have an artist turn it into something nicer. It will potentially save that artist days of time. Yeah, there's some benefit to doing that. The artist can still do all of the creative stuff along with the AI support that sits along with it. That's a tool that's happening now. Computer game companies are doing that now, and writers are doing the same thing, where they used to have a team of, say, 15 writers. They have a single writer with a bunch of AI bots that they work through, and they edit all of its work to turn it into beautifully handcrafted stories using the AI as support. But it's using other people's AI, intellectual property, in a time when these people are going to be fired and have no money. So my problem with AI isn't that it's doing all of those things per se. My problem with AI is that the capitalist society hasn't caught up and said, we all need universal basic income, because that is required, because copyright laws have collapsed. We might not like that copyright laws have collapsed. There's going to be a lot of legal battles about it. But individual countries, when they side against AI, are going to be sidelined by most business in the future. It's a horrible reality. I don't like it one bit, but it's where it's going. But the reason I don't like it is because it leaves people behind without jobs. It leaves people absolutely bereft, and the rich are getting richer. The problem isn't AI per se, although the way it's being driven by tech bros is a fucking problem. The problem is how our society is constructed and the massive hole AI is going to create in the job market, because it's huge. Most tech industries are going to be moved from, say you had 100 jobs, they're going to drop down to 15 to 20. And where do the other people get their money from? All the people who are sacked, what do they do now? And the people who've got the job still and making products, how do they sell it when there's no money out there? We're heading towards an enormous, potentially horrendous fall, unless governments have got the ability to go, this is how we pick it up and make it all work. It's going to work somehow. I don't know how yet. But yeah, I try to pitch different arguments, and it's always funny pitching a utopian society as being the worst AI crime thieves. That was a music one. It made lots of people laugh. Archbalton, soon I will DM my first 40k RPA session, and I struggle a lot with low accuracy versus game balance. Do I let an Eldari PC be as fast, as strong as he's supposed to be, or do I nerf him for balance purposes? It's an age-old question, this one, Archbalton. Elves in Warhammer Fantasy are super fast. Eldar in 40k are preternaturally quick with muscle bundles that work very differently. Go check Xenology, the 40k background book from Black Library, if you want to see the autopsy of an Elder. They are a different species, and boy, do they move differently. The RPG games often don't reflect that particularly well, because they also strive for game balance. But even when they do, they've at the back of their head, the game designer's got this itch going, yeah, but I want my Elder to be like real Elder, or my Space Marines to be like real Space Marines. So they try to botch it, cover it up with useful skills or talents that sort of make it work. It depends on your group. Some groups, it doesn't matter if there's a power imbalance between the characters in the slightest. I'm going to give you an example from my own games. In LAWhammer, that's the actual play that I play online in Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, the game that I helped design. In LAWhammer, we have some deep power disparity. Alamenawaith, who is an elf, is significantly better than most of the other PCs at a broad array of things. But equally, some of the PCs have got some real min-maxed capabilities that make them exceedingly good in one area or another. And I have just not cared about game balance at all, because it's the story that's being told at the table that is the driving point of what we're all there to do. Plus, my elves have got actual genuine flaws. And that's what I would suggest thinking about if you want to bring balance to the situation, yet still keep Eldari superiority when it comes to speed or hearing or something else. Think about what it means in practice. Like, for example, my elves in LAWhammer have some significant and real problems with adapting to surroundings. Now, you might go, what the fuck does that mean? I'll give you an example. If you walk into somebody's house and they've got a pet, typically when you first go into that house, somebody else's house, it's got somebody else's house smell. You go in there, you smell that pet, and you're like, ooh, there's a bit of smell in here. This smells a little bit weird. And then about a minute later, you don't smell it anymore. Because our brains as humans are designed to do two things. One is be adaptable, to move into an area and not have it negatively work against us, but to have detected what might be in there when we first step in, but also to save energy. Our brains stop processing stuff that doesn't matter anymore to us. So if we already know that this house smells of different house smell because there's an animal in it, or because they use a particular perfume or air spray or whatever, we don't pay attention to that. We just switch off and move on, which means that we can survive in environments that are often extreme. Massive noises going on all over the place, terrible sounds, awful smells. When we first get there, we're like, this is fucking sucky. And it takes a proper extreme before we have to do something like cover up. Now, I'm not saying if something's too loud, it's going to damage our ears. That's always the case. But there's a horrible mixture of sounds within a specific band. Unless you are neurodiverse and you can't cope with sound, your brain sort of dampens it out to the point that you stop hearing it. Now, it's there all the time, and at any point you can focus and hear it because you can channel in that way. Now, my elves can't do any of that shit, which means that when they walk into a human house for the first time and they go, hey, this human skin sheds everywhere and I can smell it. They've got a pet and they haven't cleaned that up very well. there's probably some fungus growing behind that chair. Oh, I can smell that in the air as the spores are in the air. Now, as the human comes in and goes, oh, it's got a funny smell, and then ignores it, the elf in my world is still going, oh, and it never stops, which means that they're in a state of almost constant mental distress whenever they are in high sound, high sensation environments, because they never get used to it. Meaning that most elves, at least in my world, are always wearing ear-covering helmets to prevent the noise of battle from affecting them too much. Those who aren't wearing it are often commanders sitting at the back, so that they're far enough away that they can listen to the rise and fall of the battle and the distance of it, and it's still disconcerting, but it's important that they can hear it. But the main soldiers are all covered. They're all covered typically tip to toe as well, because their skin is more sensitive. So they've got things that their skin is happy to cope with. When they get hurt, they feel it. So what does that mean? It means that my elves are constantly sitting with difficulty modifiers all over the place whenever they're in high sensation environments. That's just one way that you can counteract these high stat, out of control, imbalanced versions of characters. Hopefully that helped a bit, Arshvalton. There's lots of different ways you can do it, but I personally prefer to build something that's about stories rather than necessarily game balance. But if you are dealing with a group that's all about min-maxing and just throwing cool stats around, if you don't want them all playing Eldar, then maybe perhaps bring in a little bit of balance. The Stage Meister said there's no Isle of Lesbos in Warhammer. What would you call lesbian? No, there isn't. We had a similar a phrase for this in many of our games of Warhammer, which I haven't used in LAWhammer because it's not the best one. Now, we produced a book over on, let's go Patreon. Over on Patreon, I say a book, it's a PDF of about 15 pages of various bits of banter, swear words, crazy stuff that people say, and similar. And while I wait for Patreon to catch up, let me just get it for you. If I type in banter, will that find it? Patreon upgrade, John Teal banter. Oh no, I've got the individual part. So let me try Thieves Can. I can't remember what I called. Did anyone remember what I called that document? But I've got a document up there. I'll get the link for it afterwards, and it gives you things like this in there. But the thing that we did in our previous game was we had a story that spanned back not that far. It came from Magnus's time. And in Magnus's time, there was a bunch of elves that had come from Safri that were hanging around the Nulnar court. A court where we also have another euphemism, a Nulnar gentleman, which is for a gay man, where the high society of Nuln was known for its different set of proclivities than you would find anywhere else, regardless of the fact that it was a universal set of proclivities. The Nuln culture is the one that was always picked out for it. And instead of Lesbos, we went with Safri and Sapphic. And that's where that one came in, and I've not ported that over to LAWhammer. It's not a piece of lingo that we use, but it is quite a fun one if you wish to use it. So yeah, go check out I might actually have it in the collections. Do I have collections made up for the book? I don't have collections for the books. What the fuck? Oh, I need to go sort the LAWhammer Patreon. Anyway, it's up there for free. Go check LAWhammer Patreon, and I'll find the link for it later. If somebody posts it in the comments, I'll go find it after. Hopefully that gives you a little bit of a help. Nastra, what is deep in the middle of the Oak of Ages? Would it be a different world? A webway gate? Just wood? So this is entirely up to your own games in many respects, Nastra, but I think the answer would be as mutable as the weave itself, the great world spirit of the Wood Elves. And I think that the equivalent of a webway, although, you know, a branching set of routes that make their way across the world routes, is absolutely fair to the point that it's almost certainly the case as you move into the very spirit of the world itself. And is that in the middle of the Oak of Ages? As likely to be there as it is in many of the other places that it is across Athaloran and other woods across the world. So I think that all of your answers are almost certainly correct. Inno Games, Andy, please freezing. I said what I said. That's it. Not going any... Nope, I said what I said. Moving down. Meow. Are unicorns magical animals similar to dragons, manticores, etc., or more similar to spirits-like creatures like treemen, dryads, naiads, etc.? Yes. That's a stupid answer, but it's also kind of true. Different writers have taken both angles. So if you're trying to figure out what your version is, it's entirely up to yourself where it lands. The bloke person. Hiya, the bloke person. Hi, Andy. Hi. I wanted to ask if you had any headcanons for what would be ailing Mousselon. As far as our table, we have Nehekaran curses, pestilent research labs, insane immortal wizards, and many cults. All of those are good. The place is proliferated through with corruption. And corruption in Warhammer manifests in many ways, but if you're a wizard, that's basically saying that there is dar in and around the land, and it causes increased mutation. It causes the marshes to become deadly. Skeletons, undead creatures can literally rise without any necromancers in the local area at all. When there's lots of dar in the area, the natural order of laws begins to break down, and each one of the 8 winds of magic starts manifesting in different ways. The wind of death, for example, bringing back the dead, shouldn't be doing that under normal circumstances. When the winds of magic are flowing through the world, that naturally that doesn't happen. When they get blocked up and dar forms, or you're in a corrupted area, it does happen. So what's the reason for it? There are several. There's several in-game reasons for various horrors that were perpetrated in the area. Have we done a Mousselon stream? I don't think we have. Have we not done a Mousselon stream? So, I think the answer to this one, really, the boat person, is we should do a Mousselon stream. I'm going to add that to my list at this side, because every time that Sotek and I have a discussion about what we're going to do next, we've had somewhat of... Let me just add this. I'm pretty sure we haven't. Because I did the very first map ever of Mousselon with a mouse. I've discussed this more than once in the past. And when Mousselon was put together, there was a lot of discussion about this question. I could probably bring up a bunch of fun answers. But all of this, arguably, and more. It's a complicated situation. As I'm driving by Ascendant Overlord, are you familiar with the Dying Light games? Yes. If so, do you think volatiles would make for an interesting Warhammer Undead monster, or is there already an equivalent in Warhammer? You tend to find that Warhammer's got an equivalent of almost everything, and sometimes those equivalents are loose. In this particular case, there's not really a like-for-like equivalent. Do I think they make an interesting enemy? Yes, but I would change them. As is often the case, whenever I Warhammer-fy a monster, I always think about what it would be in the Warhammer world, how the winds of magic have caused this thing to come about, how the very nature of the gods have possibly caused this to come about, how things like Nagash have caused it to come about. There'd be a lot there to potentially unpack and discuss. But do I think it could be an interesting basis? I absolutely do. Hey, Dumbo! Do night goblins call themselves night goblins? No. My players brought one, so I was struck by this question and figured it would make for a silly super chat. So it's not a silly super chat. It's a really interesting one about Goblin Society and how Games Workshop has portrayed it. Games Workshop portrays all Greenskin society through the lens of English, meaning that they are given English names, they are given, broadly speaking, English words to call each other. All right, boss. It's generally always seen through the lens of a 1980s football hooligan from London. And so pervasive is this feel now that it got ported over into Lord of the Rings for how they also portrayed their equivalent of greenskins, their orcs. That means things like night goblins. That means things like forest goblins. These are all terms that are used by other people to describe them. Now, they themselves typically refer to themselves by their tribal markings or by their local boss and what their boss has called them, whether that be the red claw goblins or the broken tooth orcs or whatever it might be. They often don't think of themselves as any particular type. They often don't think in that sort of way. They are goblins and orcs, and they've got their own problems to worry about, not the taxonomical differences between one type of orc or one type of goblin and another. So they generally don't do that, but they're not stupid. Which means if they are, for example, encountering dwarves a lot, and some of them may even have learned how to speak Caslid, the language of the dwarves, and the dwarf equivalent, their Groby equivalent, translates through to night goblin, the goblins that live underneath the mountains, they could very, very quickly pick up on that, and indeed not only refer to themselves as that, but sometimes maybe even through cultural osmosis pass that back to some of the greenskin tribes around them. So it's not greenskin name for themselves. It's a name that's being deployed upon them, and to a degree, some tribes might even use it because of the way names spread and move around. We know that once something is named, it's sometimes very difficult to get that name off that thing. So yeah, broadly speaking, all of that. Little one there. I agree. AI is a tool, but we got to miss loot in a big scale. Yeah. AI is a mess just now. Another way of putting it. It's not a subject I like getting involved with much online because it's a subject that rightly causes some exceeding bitterness because people are losing their jobs, and the people who are losing their jobs don't have often an alternative to the job that they've lost, meaning that they're left abandoned without any form of support. And if they happen to be from a country where they don't have social security of any type, there's no way to, for example, or your government's locked down, there's no way to, for example, claim unemployment benefits, or if there's no way to have free healthcare. If you don't have free healthcare, it's a killer. AI is killing people. It's not just it uses up so much energy. The actual energy things are problems that can be solved. They are generally arguments that people take to just basically say, I don't want to use AI. It's fine. You don't want to and you shouldn't, and definitely don't. There's nothing wrong with that. But the power issues aren't a problem because they can just bank it up with some, I don't know, a sun bank. Away you go. We've got more than enough solar energy to run that particular thing. Done. The energy isn't a problem that they have clever solutions, but the people and how they're being treated, it's not just a problem, it's a massive problem, and it's not being properly addressed at all. And it makes me very concerned for a lot of people. Not myself. I'm lucky enough that I'm in a relatively niche part of a niche industry, and I will always have something I can do because I'm a man of many hats. I don't just do arty bits or map bits or writing. I do production, putting books together. I'm at the top tier as well. So I'm in a position where I can put together all of these books. And I'm someone personally who will always be producing all of my professional work without AI. I mean, why? I don't need to use it. It's actually quicker for me often just to frickin' do it myself than it is to go to something else, ask for it to do a thing that's not right, ask for it to do another one, and another one. And by that time, I could have already drawn like 5 houses or done some writing or whatever. It tends to be a slow process. Admittedly, though, writing is changing that completely. If you take a look at AI writing just now, it's literally mental. How quickly it's moving. Anyway, let's move off. Bernard Damerval? Bernard? Oh, there's so many ways I could pronounce this. I'm going to go with Bernard because it's got a nice round tone. I'm probably mincing your name. Apologies. I love the podcast. Oh, thank you. Sotek and I have put a lot of work into this over the course of the last 2 years. We never intended it to be what it now is, which is its own business, doing its own thing, and about to expand massively into a bunch of other areas as we do other stuff. This wasn't the plan. We were just doing it for fun. And we're still just doing it for fun. If it ever reaches the point where we're not doing it for fun, I almost certainly will stop. Doesn't mean that Lorebeards will stop, because there'll be other people who can move in. But if it's not fun for me, I won't be doing it. But it is. I love this shit. I can't see how it ever won't be fun because I found people who find it as much fun as I do. And that's what's important. And if you're surrounded by people who are just geeking out and having fun in a world that currently is exceedingly tough and depressing for many people, I say grip onto that tightly. Anyway, it whittles away a few hours at the law office. Law. You're going to be getting a lot of AI cases coming your direction at some point. Well, maybe not. Depends what law you're in. Have you read Knights of Bretonnia series? And so, what did you think? As a point of clarity, is Raelos a normal Grail Knight or something else? Yeah, there's lots of interesting choices made in those books. Yes, read it. What I think? Love it. Do I think that there are some lore choices that an editor could have just come in and tidied up? Yes. This is a perennial Black Library issue. Back in Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 2 era, so we're talking 2005 to 2010 for me, when I was doing a lot of work with them. There was a bunch of books being released that were just filled with glaring contradictions with the fantasy battle lore and with the Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay lore. And when it was highlighted by someone like me behind the scenes, it was sometimes fixed and it sometimes wasn't. But broadly speaking, Black Library were much more interested in cool Warhammer stories than they were about getting everything right. And now you might not prefer that. Indeed, to quote, okay, let's say not quote, paraphrase Mark Gascoigne. Marco was like, there is no Warhammer canon. It's whatever we decide it is. And Marco's right, because it was all made up. And it was continuing to be all made up. And that's what it was. It was a vehicle for their cool stories, and it was a vehicle for ultimately helping sell miniatures on the next step over. And Black Library became enormously famous from telling lots of really cool stories. Now, did they all match up with all the rest of the lore? No. Did they sometimes make glaring errors? Oh, yeah. And sometimes those errors were so huge that the fans would complain. Sometimes, because the vast majority of the readers didn't know most of the lore, there was no complaint. One of the biggest issues that we had when we were trying to port over various parts from the novels was that they were full of errors that we weren't allowed to use inside the role-playing game. And unless you knew what all those errors were, writers just ported those over, which meant that the official line inside Black Industries at the time was, don't use Black Library novels, when they were a Black Library company. Genuinely hilarious, because it was easier to say this is the route to follow, just these books, than it was all of these books out here. There's 140 books that you can draw from, but you're only allowed to draw about 30% of the information from those, the good bits that are right. The other 70 we have to ignore. So that's why, broadly speaking, the Black Library novels were never considered canon for the Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay book creation. In the same way that the studio, when it was creating its Warhammer material, it only considered the other creations of the studio as canon. Anything else, like Fantasy Roleplay books or Black Library books, were fuel, was fodder, were things that they could use if they wanted to, but not only could they contradict it, they would contradict it for whatever they needed for their miniature battle game. Because that's what Warhammer was for, sorting out the miniatures battle game. So, is there mistakes in there? Yeah, there are. Do I wish they changed? Of course I do, because I'm someone that likes tidying everything up. But equally, I really love this, the bit that I'm going to conclude on. When all of these mistakes are pulled together, when all of these factual inconsistencies are pulled together, it gives people like Sotek and myself an opportunity to say, how can we make them all work together? It is, as Sotek said previously, something that I brought to the Lorebeards table because it's something that I did in Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 4. I had a conversation with Games Workshop exactly about this, and I said, look, I want to use this thing from this old book, but it's contradicted by later lore. This is how I want to use it, because I think I can use it, bring it up to date, and make it match the modern lore. And every time I said that, they were like, oh, hell yeah, give that a go. Because they like the old lore, because it's their lore. But they also know that it's sometimes problematic, it's sometimes broken, it sometimes contradicts other things, or it's sometimes just no longer relevant to what Warhammer is. But that doesn't mean that it can't be. And as we've seen from specialist games, where they are often diving deep into old versions of Warhammer 40k et al. And bringing them back up to date for newer versions, whether that's in Necromunda or Blood Bowl or whatever else that they happen to be producing, or the old world. All of these things can be repurposed and brought up to date. So that's a long-winded way of saying, yeah, so sure. Let's see what Byfoot's here saying. One of my co-workers using ChatGPT to track down a citation for a chemical synthesis and was directed to something like 4 different books, none of which had anything relevant. Yeah, the hallucinations of ChatGPT and language models in general are real. Meaning that anyone that relies upon AI for access to information is almost certainly going to be repeatedly exposing themselves to something that the AI has created to please the reader and convince them that it's good at doing what it does. And then when they're caught out and they say, you did that wrong, it'll say something like, I presume, yeah, you're right, you're so smart, well done, you found that thing that's wrong, let's refix this and make it what it actually is. So if you happen to be one of those people out there that's using something like ChatGPT as a search engine, make sure that you check sources at all times. It's a little bit like the Wikipedia for Warhammer. If you go into the Wikipedia for Warhammer and you type in any subject, like witch hunters, for example, the witch hunter entry that's up there is wrong. Objectively wrong. It cites books wrong. And that wasn't created by AI, it was created by humans. And they've just read it wrong. Their reading comprehension is just not right. And they have written an entire section about witch hunters, which is in so many places objectively wrong. And why do I know it's objectively wrong? Because I wrote the bits that they were actually citing. And they just done it wrong. They have conflated two things that shouldn't be conflated. And that's good. I mean, good. It's good for people like us. But it reminds us that we should always check sources. So if you are someone that uses AI in that regard, just check your sources. Thanks very much for saying that was a cool elf description. That was one way of doing it. There's lots of things. I'm actually doing a blog at the moment about elves and how they work in LAWhammer, not in Warhammer as a whole, but the LAWhammer version. It's based upon a set of articles that I was writing for an elf book back in the Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 2 era. I was commissioned to write one alongside David Chart. I'm not sure if David got his contract, so I got my contract, and I was writing an elf book back then, and I think it was going to be like a 256 page book with the high elves, the dark elves, the wood elves, Lorelorn elves. It's why the Aeonir, for example, in Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 4 were already relatively detailed, because they'd already been written for a previous Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay book as to what they should be. So the Aeonir, if you don't know it, that is the name that was given to the Lorelorn elves. So yeah, it's a combination of a lot of the shit that I was writing for that, much of which draws from Xenology, the book that I mentioned earlier on in this Q&A. Xenology describes the Eldar in 40k and exactly how they work, and the elves and the Eldar are not so dissimilar. After all, the Eldar are nothing more than space elves. So there was a lot of the details from that were extrapolated from and developed further. But that never got anywhere, but I'm going to be writing up a thing about it, because the recent elf books for Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 4th edition did nothing to describe elves. All they did was describe where elves come from, some of their history, a little bit about their gods, but did nothing about actually role-playing an elf and how it's different to be an elf. And in the elf book that David and I were going to do, there was going to be like 30 pages there about physiological differences with elves, how they perceive the world differently to everybody else, how being an elf is basically different from being a human. And I do mean there's going to be a good chunk of it in there. It was going to be all useful game shit. It wasn't just going to be 30 pages of dry and dusty, and elves have got big ears that do this. Yeah, bullshit to that. There's going to be adventure hooks and all sorts of cool shit, special rules, different talents that could be activated, blah, 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 blah. Moving down. Is the character repellents inspired by Tamora Pierce book series along the line S1983 to 1988? The main character even has the same name. I don't believe so, but maybe. I don't know the inspiration of this one. You would need to ask Nigel Stillman. He was the one who wrote it. So I can't say for certain one way or the other here, Walking Tree, but it's enough for me to actually go and check that out. So I might be able to... let me just type that in. Check it out. I can also possibly ask someone who was around at the time when the first cartridge was being created and ask if they know. So I'll follow up on that one, but as it currently stands, don't know. Moving down by Mihao here, who asks, could one or more of the sky settings still live somewhere in the world's edge of mountains? Yes. Well, in the mountains of Mourne, for example. Yes. If yes, could he or she be worshipped by lesser giants as a sort of deity? Yeah, that could definitely be the case. If you wish to do that, it would not be a problem. Right, let's get down and get the rest of our super chats here. Carrie, could a deal with a chaos god restore a Nehekaren's body, get them a new one? Yeah, sure, but all deals with chaos are never what you expect them to be. There's a reason that Cetra did not bend the knee. The chaos gods are duplicitous, 2, 3, 8-faced, completely incapable of being trusted entities under the best of circumstances. And if you're bargaining your way in, then you're not one of theirs already. Now, if you're one of theirs already, one of the great lies of the Warhammer setting is that chaos doesn't pay. It does. Look at all the success stories of chaos. All of the great chaos champions who have become enormously powerful. And in the later editions of Warhammer, the negatives that came along with that, for example, losing their mind and no longer being even human or whatever they may once have been, and becoming effectively nothing more than almost living demons, that's sort of gone. They still have character. They still speak. If you read any of the stories, Archaon's having just handy chats with all of his generals. That's not what it used to be when you fell to chaos. Now chaos is sort of right. The world is going to end. Join us and bring it down and live forever. Ascend as a demon. It's a good sales pitch because it's true. And it's horrendous that it's true, and not many people will succeed at it. It's a little bit like capitalism. Almost no one's going to become a millionaire. Well, billionaire nowadays, but no one's going to become super rich. Let's use that instead. But the prospect is there for everybody, but most people are crushed by this system. And that's almost what the Chaos Gods are like. Very few people are going to become, I don't know, the equivalent of Archaon. And there's only going to be one, I don't know, Chaos richest man in the world. I won't drop names. I have no desire to get political with this. But there's only going to be one Archaon out there. And the various lieutenants and those around them who have all succeeded in their own right by doing whatever it is that they did. But they are all success stories. In this one, it's making a deal, which means you're not part of that success story. You're basically trying to get something that you want without falling to chaos, i.e., I don't know, having a different view to what capitalism should be, but trying to get the best that capitalism has to offer. But because you never go, neck deep in capitalism, you're never going to become the king demon. But could they do it? Yes. Is it likely to be a double-edged sword that goes completely wrong? Not just yes. Yeah, it's going to go fucking wrong for whoever tries it, and they're almost certainly going to fall to chaos, lose their mind, and go completely wrong. I'm going to bring up papers. I did say I would call more machine learning than AI. I mean, that's fair. Computer scientist folks in chat, is there really a difference between the two? There's a problem just now, Pakefield boy, in general, where AI is being used for too many things. You go into business and they're saying, we're using AI for this, we're using AI for that. We're going to use, Copilot to rifle through all of these documents, pull it out and give me the core information that's held in there, and then synthesize it out to a PowerPoint. Thanks very much, Copilot. And now we're all going to go to a meeting and I'm going to have Copilot quickly give me the core points from that so I can do a speech about it. And you're right, machine learning is sort of in there. AI, though, is used for almost anything that involves deeper algorithms these days. I mean, everything is getting called AI, and it doesn't actually matter what the true distinctions are between them, because the blanket overall term that is being generally used by people out there is what sort of matters, because that's what they're thinking about when the words AI get mentioned. So yeah, I think you're correct. There's lots of nitpicky differences we can make, but the way that language evolves and the way that language is already applied here, it sort of doesn't matter. It's much like there's many medical terms that we use colloquially, and it's the colloquial terms that matter, not the medical term, for the vast majority of people. Charles C. K. Dwarf is an exonym versus Dawi. Yeah. Is elf, orc, goblin, ogre, halfling, or any of those also an exonym? Yes. What's the autonyms? So halfling already have it. It's sort of mentioned in Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 4. I'm not sure if Andy put it in. It's Hafen. H-F-F-E-N, which many people move towards halfling. Elf is split up between Azure, Druchi, Aeonir, whatever. They don't call themselves elves. That is almost a callback to the Fae, spirits, and similar. The things from the forest, it's not. Orc, they don't really have themselves names for them in the way that, as we discussed, similar, much like the goblins, the grobies, whatever. Ogres, fuck knows, probably just ogre. That's not been covered. I was going to do a supplement about that. I gave it over to B. Sherry to write for Fantasy Roleplay 4, and B didn't cover this. I intended it to be covered where there was going to be a discussion about the ogre language and how ogres refer to themselves, but they don't have imagination in the way that others do, and we're going to discuss where the term ogre had come from. Yeah, I don't like the idea of giving all species a name for themselves, because some of them don't do that because of cultural reasons, some of them don't do that because of limitations of intelligence, and some of them don't do that because they don't have a singular word for their species. They have lots of different words according to the circumstance. So hopefully that helps a bit there. Albin Linkfist. Apologies if I completely screwed your name. Hey, Andy. Hiya. I heard you and Sotek say that the one world is bigger than the real world, but how much bigger? The how much is a source of much contention. Is it bigger? Yeah. And it's generally said to be about a third bigger. but I have seen some writers claim it's double the size, which does lead to some interesting questions as to mass and gravity. And are people in the Warhammer world affected by different forces than the real world? And the answer is, stop thinking about it so hard. And I know that's a stupid answer, but that is the answer that I'm constantly told whenever I ask the question. And do I ask that question? Oh, hell yeah. Because I always, whenever I got brought in for a new job of Warhammer, and I've been brought in like 3 or 4 times to do writing by different people at different points. One of my first ones is, do we want to answer these things? Because I have answers if you want them. And I'm willing to dive into them, exactly what the mass of the Warhammer world is, why it has this mass, why it's different, what's going on inside the great world spirit of the Warhammer world. It's not the real world. Its physics are completely different. But on this one, is it bigger? Yes. How much bigger? That's a matter of contention, and it's difficult to say. And one of the biggest reasons that it's difficult to say is this. How big is a mile? Now, if you go historically, there's lots of answers for this. Lots of them. And a Warhammer mile, particularly if you look at any of my maps where it's always marked as Imperial mile, means nothing. There's a reason that I mark things in imperial miles or some equivalent. It's because ultimately it means nothing to real world geography. The mile in Warhammer almost certainly is different to the real world mile, meaning that something that's marked as a 300-mile journey means nothing. It means exactly what the GM wants it to mean in truth, exactly what an individual writer wants it to mean. Now, do I have it all scaled behind the scenes for my maps? Yeah, of course I do, because I'm that guy. I can't help myself. But as it currently stands, there's not a definitive answer for this. Brock 6000, hey Andy, hiya. What is a unique aspect of Beastman culture which could be teased out into a larger aspect to make them more developed like Skaven Chorfs? I have several answers here, so I'm trying to just drop it down to one. Yeah, this one's a bit of a toughie. Okay, one. It's one that everybody knows, but it is so badly covered because the army lists focus on what's needed for the army, and the role-playing game often reflects it, forgetting anything other than, oh yeah, there's some mutants that have been taken in, because that's a core component of the story of the Beastmen, that they take in mutant children, and it's the mutant children. What happens with them, actually? Who takes care of them? What happens when a mutant is left in the forest? Who are the caregivers of the Beastmen? What is their culture actually like? It's often described as brutal and horrendous, but is it? In practice, on a day-to-day basis, rather than, say, for example, a challenge or a fight or something awful that occurs, what is their actual day-to-day life like? What do they do? They're intelligent. They're not stupid. One of the biggest mistakes of writing for Beastmen is to just turn them into beasts. But so many of them come from human origin with human brains. So many of them are fully capable of not just human speech, but human reflection, human understanding, human compassion. How does this work? So if I was to bring out one thing, it would be the caregivers of the Beastmen. How does it work? And that would speak to a large section of its society that's never been talked about, because they always focus upon the almost frothing, rabid Beastmen that are attacking the villages, burning them down, doing whatever it is that they do there. And I think it would be fun to dive into the actual culture of the Beastmen. Whoop, and that was your one. Let's move down to Survivor. I will Survivor. Like 40k's Black Library Inquisitor series with Jack Draco. Wow, that's going back a bit. Which would you say is a Black Library book that is hilariously long compared to the Warhammer Fantasy lore, except of its day or has aged very poorly? Okay, this is going to be controversial. Gotrek and Felix, almost all the way through, contradicts Warhammer lore everywhere. And I mean everywhere. To the point that, now here's one that's again slightly controversial. When I was doing Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 4, I was told to never use Gotrek and Felix in anything, because everything it presented was broken. Doesn't match either the battle game or the roleplay game anymore. All you can do is use them as characters that come in and leave. That's it. Don't think too much about their backgrounds. Don't try to make sense of the things that they do. So there's one that might surprise Gojek and Felix, the core component of Warhammer Fantasy literature. I was told to ignore, which I always find funny. But it's not a surprise. If you go back to the original books, you go, well, this is a take. This is not the characters that I will come to know later. Yeah, that's not a surprise at all. But lots of Warhammer books, particularly the early ones. I mean, just take a look. Say, for example, some of the most lauded books of the old library, like the Genevieve stories. Genevieve is a vampire. They literally had to rewrite the books just to make her make sense within the new vampire lore. And I say new vampire lore when fifth edition came along and turned it into the vampire counts. They completely changed vampires when they did that, and Genevieve got outdated immediately. Our entire book was a nonsense. None of it made any sense. It was just like Jack Draco, but they wanted to publish the books. They were really popular, so they edited them. They made her Lamian. They didn't really change the story, meaning that we still have vampires being totally cool, wandering around Altdorf, having an absolute laugh. Most of the old books are in this particular category, which amuses me a good bit. Phil5991. What are your thoughts with Archaon's lieutenants introduced in Storm of Chaos and who never returned after these events? Would you try to reimagine them? Yes. My thoughts are absolute wasted opportunity. They already had a bunch of other characters they could have used. They didn't need to make new ones that were just spun out of air. They could have used different ones. They didn't, so they should do something with them. Why not? They're there. I mean, they're fine. Let me just bring up this one from Patrick. You have mentioned how many Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 2 PCs would become godly powerful after a year or two of play. How, given on limits and character advancements being around 35-40, they max them all out. And that is godlike. And go take a look at the stats of a dragon. You have higher stats than Karl Franz, than dragons. As I said, and I've said before, Patrick Mulligan, in previous streams, we were playing with Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 2 Neat for our campaign that started back in 2005. In 2003, I was writing my own edition of Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay called Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay Andy Edition, because there was no new version since Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 1, and Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 1 was massively out of date with Warhammer. So I made my own edition, which was crazy. It was using D6s. It was a proper Warhammer fantasy battle, fantasy roleplay. You used D6s, it had rolls to hit, rolls to win. It was super fun at the table. It was fast. And then I heard that Chris Pramus, who I think I'm going to be meeting next month. Chris Pramus wrote Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 2, and he's going to a con in Germany. That I can't remember the name of, DreerCon, I can't remember what it is, in November the 11th, 12th, somewhere like that. So it's about a month from now, and I'm going to it too. I haven't seen Chris for years, since he was last in Edinburgh. So anyway, Chris Pramus was writing a new edition of Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, and I was like, well, if he's doing that, toss, I don't need to write one. Woohoo! And it came out, and it was a great game, a brilliant game for short-term play. But if you play it long-term, you run out of careers to go into, you max out your careers, and in the game that I was playing, I had a 16-year-old girl who had reached the point of being more powerful than Karl Franz, while simultaneously, she was nowhere near that in terms of what she should have been capable of doing. But 2 years worth of, she was 17 by that point, she wasn't 16. 2 years worth of XP had turned her into a monster. Because the game didn't have a very well considered top end, because it wasn't designed for long-term play. It was designed for like sessions of up to like 24, 30 sessions, something like that, a year or so at max. And when it works within its remit, it does an exceptional job. But once you move beyond its remit, it all begins to fall apart. The stat scaling in Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 2 are kind of broken. So yeah, if you add 40 on top of something that's already 40 and it's got a +5 from a stat thing, that's already 85%. A dragon's strength, it's only like 70. I mean, you can't be arm wrestling bears and dragons and winning. It's just weird and wrong. It needed a balancing effect somehow to organize it. Magladroth44. Hi, Magladroth. Nice to see you coming by. Just a general request that I will keep making on stream. CA, when the gash comes out, add OG Mortax like the Dread King, Lord Varian. Yeah. If not, then Lorebeards Tamarkan Brothers love They Ask Me Anything, Andy. Oh, thanks, Magladroth. And I don't think they'll do this. In both cases, Magladroth, and I don't like to be a Debbie Downer on this one. But I think that when they do Nagash, they will only use, they're most likely to use the Mortax that were used in the End Times. They won't, I presume, move to other sources. They might, because we've seen quite a few things that I didn't expect to hit Total War that did. Like, I didn't expect Dakala to ever come, because Dakala, as a character, contradicts the lore. And I think you're going to be able to... I've actually got a challenge for you all. So how many people are watching you? There's about 250 odd in various places. Right, so all of you out there, watch Total War Warhammer. And when Dakala comes out, I've got a challenge for you. Will you ever see Dakala personally state that she's an elf? I am interested to know if that happens. Because if they do, then they have decided, Games Workshop, that elves can mutate. Because Dakala, as she stands, is a great, big, massive mutated elf. Or, if she never mentions it once, it means that basically they've snuck Dakala in without ever confirming that she breaks the lore. Now, it would not surprise me if they never ever mention it. Oh, they might put things on stream, like she's facing off against elves and there's elf stuff going on. But will they mention that she herself is an elf, that she's tied to, say, Samuel, any of that? I'm really fascinated to know. Now, I almost certainly won't play the game anywhere near enough to find out. But for those of you who are watching and who do play the game, go hunt that bastard down, because I'm really interested to know whether there is a lore breach done there by the licensing team, because the licensing team decide what they can and can't do, obviously. And if the licensing team have decided that elves can mutate, that's a change in the lore, and that'll be fun. But if the licensing team have decided not to cover it, then that's a change in Dakala, arguably. That's quite fun. In my world, I have an answer that both allows her to be an elf and look the way she does, but that's the LAWhammer version. The LAWhammer version, as is the case with most things, is completely crazy and mental. Where's that elf article going to be? When I eventually finish it, it'll be posted up on my Patreon blog. It'll be free. I don't put stuff like this behind Patreon barriers. The Patreon barriers are really just there for like behind the scenes stuff at LAWhammer and stuff like that. Or if I'm working on a set of rules and I'm not publishing it yet, it will go to the patrons first, and then once I'm happy with it, it goes out to everybody. But that article is just going to be posted up publicly. I'm about halfway through writing it. It's turned out to be much longer than I prefer, which is a pain in the fucking arse, because I don't have enough time. Anyway, moving down. Here we go. Just making sure I'm not missing any of the other ones. Battlefield, Anti-Law, Vampires are cakes. Yes. Bretonia Lego bricks, absolutely. Chaos is a capitalist nightmare world. Yes. It's actually interesting. We're playing with demons as capitalist horrors over in the Rookery stuff I'm writing just now. And it's the fucking worst. Really just the absolute worst. Joe the Ogre. Hey, Joe. Give me one lesser-known ogre fact. Love the show. So one of my lesser-known ogre facts is actually quite well known, but where it comes from is lesser known. So I'm going to drop that one in. Ogres and halflings work together really well. This is dropped hard in some rules, and it's largely been me pushing it. So, for example, in the Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay rules, it was written directly into the rules because I wrote those parts. And the foundation point of that is the very first Ogre Kingdoms book. And when that first Ogre Kingdoms book was released, there was a host of writers' blogs that were popped online explaining their choices. And they discussed the old ones, the halflings, and the ogres. That's where it came from. Those blogs got deleted later. Because they decided not to use halflings, obviously. They used Noblars instead. So Noblars were the core race. Halflings are stupid. They got dumped. They're not parts of the ogres anymore. But the core component of the background that they created never changed. But it wasn't ever published until we got it into Fantasy Roleplay. It'd only been published online by Games Workshop. So the online publishing of that slowly sunk into Fantasy Roleplay. Because I took notes about everything that Games Workshop were publishing, no matter where it's been published at the time, because I was working for the game. And at that point, there was a general belief that ogres couldn't be PCs. Indeed, amongst the user base, they said that there were no ogres in the Empire. Get that. And that was because what Ogre Kingdoms had done when they changed them. And my argument at the time was, yes, they were. This is how they were. And this is how we use them. And I wrote an entire set of rules for Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 2 for ogres. It was an exceedingly cheap production. It's pretty shit if you go look it up. But it's available on various websites somewhere, my old ogre rules. And they were, again, based relatively heavy on the various articles that have been posted online by Games Workshop Studio way back in the day. Hey, Phil! So, what were the old ones thinking when they made one dwarf woman born every 10 births? Dwarf demography would be even worse than elf demography, even if they were not constantly fighting, but two of the most popular species in the world at the same time. What were those idiots thinking? Right, so there's various ways that we can respond to this. One is 1 in 10 might actually be a benefit. We discussed this. Was I in that discussion? I don't think I was. Lindsay discussed this in an interview with Lorebeards approximately 2.5 years ago. So Lindsay, who, if you're over on the Lorebeards Discord channel, and I think this is probably the best time to mention it if we haven't already done so, we have got our own Lorebeards Discord channel now. And if you're not over there, you really should be, because the chat is spreading nicely. Let me go get a link for that as I'm chatting away like the idiot that I am. Okay, so let me go grab that. That's the stream news, Lorebeard news. Here is the Discord link. Control C. Let's just pop that into the comments. Control V, like so. So if you go follow that link, you can go join our Discord. And if you go in there, you'll also find that Lindsay carries, much like me, a purple name because she's a Lorebeard. She's one of the Lorebeards that's going to be doing something in future. And this is a conversation that she had with Sotek quite some time ago, explaining how the culture that dwarves have and what they do, there is potentially benefits from this. It's not a bad thing. And there's various species in the real world that have similar numbers in terms of their fertility rates and how they express with different genders. And she was discussing different ways that that could be done. So I'm going to say that it's not necessarily a bad idea. But for it not to be a bad idea, you've got to sit down and figure out how your dwarfs work. If you use them like humans, it's a bad fucking idea, because humans do not match that sort of setup at all well in any way, shape, or form. And all those men wandering around being cock blocked all the time, there's going to be a lot of frustration going on. Yeah, it's definitely going to be something a little bit different. Anyway, moving down to Teo Benora. I've almost certainly said your name wrong. Apologies. Considering we have horse dragon, what possibility of elf dragon or, God forbid, dwarf dragon? Yeah, dragons. In fact, I'm going to take a slightly different angle on this one, Teo. One thing that bugs me about fantasy writing in general is that it's always done from the perspective of the real world. In the real world, we have one primary sapient, clever species. It's us, humans. And when we as humans create new species, they are often conflated to become eventually half human, half whatever. Whether it is through interbreeding or because it's a human with animal traits, like a centaur, or if you wish, if we pronounce it ostensibly correctly, a centaur. So a centaur, if you prefer. A centaur has half human, half horse. A mermaid, half fish. Or mer person, if you will. Merfolk. Half fish, half human. But in fantasy worlds, you got all manner of shit. Now, occasionally, they do this. A bull centaur. Half dwarf, half bull. I mean, it's got literally nothing to do with a centaur at all, but sure, bull centaur it is. They very occasionally do this, but they almost always forget that the second they start with things like half dragons, half elves, half halflings, half dwarves, whatever, why does it have to be always half human, half something else? Where's my elf dragon? Where's my elf dwarf? Where's my elf halfling? They don't do it, to the point that some games, like say D&D, you can play a half elf, I'll play a half orc. What about the half dwarf, half human? It's not half dwarf, half human, pardon me, half dwarf, half elf. They're not the core components of the rules because it's always taken from the human perspective. And it's something that just really bugs me. But could we have possibilities of other animals mixing in a variety of ways in the Warhammer world? Absolutely. The concept of cryptid is ported over from the real world. Cryptids being basically animals that are constructed from multiple other animals and turn into a monster. Often because during medieval eras, they didn't understand what a giraffe was or a hippopotamus or a big massive bison, and they just confused it to be something else. Oh, it's got like the neck of oh crap. how do we describe a giraffe? It's got the body of a cheetah, maybe, because they're spotty, and the neck of a, what the fuck got a neck like that? Ooh. And they try to make sense of it with their very basic understanding of biology. Now, some of it's just made up because somebody hears a story of this crazy creature and they draw it and they say, like this, and they're like, yeah, sort of. There's no surprise that we have tons of cryptids, but in the Warhammer world, these cryptids are real. And could we go in a variety of different directions beyond what's already happened? Yeah, sure, it's fun. TGS. Is there a Dawi term for halflings as there is for Ulgi and Elgi? How do dwarves and halflings get on? Fine, halflings get on with almost anyone if they're allowed to. Dwarves equally tend to not get on with most until they've been shown to be trustworthy. Halflings in general are trustworthy, barring one core thing, which is central to dwarf mentality. Halflings don't really have much concern for personal property. They share things, everything. It's a core component of their culture. If they need a hoe and their neighbor has got a hoe, they go take the neighbor's hoe and they start hoeing, and they'll probably put it back, or they'll just put it on their own shed. A rake will pass around through multiple halflings and multiple generations. And they're constantly in each other's pockets. They also live in each other's pockets. The average halfling clan all live in one area. And that's often just one building. There might be as many as 30 or 40 living inside one relatively small house. Most of them bundled together in the same beds, lying on the same floors, all living in with each other. They are swapping partners. They're swapping children even. They're community driven. And to them, that is a norm. Dawi are individuals who believe in personal property and something being theirs. They really respect craftsmanship and ownership. And there is a strong butting of heads here. Both are aware of each other's way of living. So the halflings know that the dwarves are really weird about this shit. So they know that they probably shouldn't, you know, I need an axe, and that dwarf who's passing through's got one. I'll just pick it off the back of his truck. Boff, 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 and use it. Oh, he's gone by, he's gone. And 4 days later, the dwarf goes, where's my axe gone? Arse, because they happen to pass through the mootland. They're fully aware that halflings also tend to steal things, as they put it, where they don't think of it as stealing, they just think of it as using the correct tool for the correct job, borrowing if you must, but nothing really is owned by anyone, man. That's not really how the halflings think. So because of that, they butt. Now, do they have a term? Yes, absolutely. Have I written it down anywhere? No. I've not used one. And it's not been added to any lexicon that I've done. I'm not aware of it. If the most recent books have covered that, pardon me. I'll take another drink. If the most recent books have covered that, then great, but I'm not aware that they have. Because I've got my own lexicon that I use for Khalazid on my computer. That is a mixture of all the stuff that I've written on top of the stuff that's been written in official publications. And anything that I've written gets added on top to anything else. And if someone has a new word and adds it to an official publication that contradicts one of mine, I then just use words that mean things that are similar but not quite the same. So yeah, they absolutely do have one. I've no idea what it is. I'm going to go make one. It'll probably be something relatively close to it. Elgi, Ogi. It'll probably be Halfgi. They call themselves the Halfin, so Halfgi almost certainly would make sense. It wouldn't be HALF, it'd be HAFFGI or HAFGI. How would I do that? You've actually got me thinking about it, TGS now. Let me just go and just open up my hard drive. There's a problem there. So I would make it Halfgi, HAVGI. Taking a little look at what I have here. Halfgi. Yeah. Almost certainly Halfgi. Yeah, Halfgi. Definitely. Just looking at my notes there. In fact, I'm going to write it in. We have now added it to the LAWhammer version, if nothing else. Here we go. And Halfin. So thanks for that, TGS. Added that to my game. Moving down. Rock! Tinfoil hat time. Do love these. What if dragon ogres were split into ogres, halflings, and lizardmen? Explains why they're all resistant to chaos, or wyverns not. So what if dragon ogres are split into ogres, halflings, and lizardmen? So what, there's like bits of lizardmen in them, so not dragon? Is that what you're saying? I'm not quite sure what you're saying here, Brock. Right, I'm going to reread this to make sure that I'm getting what you're saying. What if dragon ogres were split into ogres, halflings, and lizardmen? So not ogres and dragons. So ogre, halfling, and lizardman. And that would explain how they're resistant to chaos. Or wyverns. Maybe? I mean, sure. I don't think I'd do that, though, because that suggests that they're a split species rather than their own unique species, which is what they are. Dragon ogres are neither dragons nor ogres. They're dragon ogres. So I would probably go with that instead. Moving down to Phil. Why do dwarves refer to their ancestors as gods when they are nothing like the gods of the other cultures? It's just a matter of convenience. How do they comprehend the gods of other species? First, it's brave of you to think that all the species all think of gods in the same way. They don't. Dwarves believe that their ancestors look over them and are like the gods that others have as well. Just because they're not doesn't mean that they're not. They are constantly trying to emulate their gods as perfect examples of what it is to be a dwarf. They are attempting to replicate their greatest actions, do the, things that would effectively be seen as good in their ancestors' eyes. Their ancestors are almost like the beginning point of a platonic emanation, where everything is perfect at the beginning and it slowly gets worse and worse the further from the source that you get. And the further from the source you get, the worse the dwarves get. That's genuinely bullshit, but many of them believe that. So it's not a matter of convenience. It's what they've always called them. Almost since the beginning, they have worshipped their ancestors. Ancestor worship is where it's at. The word God is not from... I think this is a linguistic problem. I'm going to take this from a different angle. The word God is, if we're just defining it, the Reichspiel word. In that we're using... in Gott, if you must. But in that, the route that we have through to understanding the dwarves is English. And the translation of their ancestors that they worship as gods is ancestor god. But if you look at what they refer to themselves, it's not that. It's just their holy ancestors. So it's complicated, but they are the equivalent of their gods because they are worshipped as much as we view worshipped. They have cults. They are their gods. So it's no surprise that people like, say, for example, visitors from the Empire would go, yup, that's their ancestor gods because that's who they're revering. And there is ancestor worship in many parts of the Empire as well. So, yeah, I have no issue with this being used the way it's being used. Dubbo, here's a fun idea. How about a goblin fact? So many I could go with. So many. I'm going back through old books and going, I could use that one. Oh, I could use that one. Yeah. This is a really simple one. It's one that lots of you will know, but there's lots of different things we could do. But I'm using this one specifically because it counteracts how many people view goblins and snotlings and greenskins in general. In many pieces of art, goblins, in fact, if we go right back to the beginning of Warhammer, goblins used to trade with dwarfs. They weren't antagonistic per se. They hated each other, but they traded. They worked with each other sometimes. Grom the Paunch of the Misty Mountain has got stories with dwarves that were involved working with them. Over time, the antagonism between the different species got ramped up with each edition of Warhammer, until eventually the goblins, which were an entirely approachable species to begin with, no longer were. And so they moved into a different slot, which is when you face off against them, they are killed and sometimes captured. And there is still remnants of this inside the literature. We, for example, see the stories of various dwarf kings who have had their various families kidnapped by dwarves, by orcs and goblins in particular, and just kept for reasons that make no sense given the modern greenskins, who just eat their captives. Generally, why do you bother keeping them? Unless you're going to use it as some sort of trophy. And even then, you're not just going to keep it in a dungeon. They don't need dungeons. That's not really how orcs work. but it sort of has held on. And we still have remnants of this. One of the most famous pictures of Sigmar is Sigmar with a goblin jester at his feet. And that's interesting. Goblins have changed. And the interesting part is that change isn't fully installed. There's still lots of examples of goblins interacting with dwarves, with humans, and doing things that you wouldn't expect if you read any orc and goblin army list. It's yeah, that's an interesting one. Yes, I'm 2/4 ogre on my mother's side. Nice one, Brock. Good to know. Tale, what would it mean for the species of the old world to share a common ancestor like our world? So there's lots of things that it could mean. For example, you might be able to crossbreed in a way that we know in the Warhammer world sort of doesn't work. So if, for example, elves and dwarves shared a common ancestor, it's possible they wouldn't be so far apart from each other that occasionally, should they interbreed, that you would get yourself a living child. Now, possibly, much like, say, donkeys and horses breeding mules, you might end up with the equivalent of a mule, someone who themselves isn't fertile, but perhaps takes the best qualities of both other species. There could be lots of fun ways that you could play around with this, but generally, because Warhammer loosely perceives sex as icky, because the writers are often thinking about, well, what will the kids say? What will the mothers say? Because how dare we discuss, the human condition and the fact that sex is a core component in pretty much every adult's life. They often avoid this entirely. So you'll find that the answers that are built up over time may have started off with things like half breeds, so half human, half orc. Half orcs were a thing in Warhammer. Half elves were a thing in Warhammer. Presumably half dwarves, half dwarf, half elves. They were all things in Warhammer to begin with, because in the original Warhammer, we go back to, say, 3rd edition of Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, 1st edition, they did have common ancestors, and the old ones elevated them all in different ways. And they also shared a common language as the core beginning point. And that language developed in lots of different ways in different parts of the Warhammer world. And they shared basically everything. They have a shared common DNA and a shared common language, a shared common everything. That changes massively as we progress through the later editions, as they go, yeah, I don't really want to think about elves having sex with dwarves. That's weird. Species can't interbreed. Oh, sure, that sort of shit happens off camera, maybe, perhaps, but they don't. In fact, elves and dwarves hate each other. Goblins and dwarves, they hate each other. Everyone hates each other. So that thing just never happens. Elves find everyone else despicable. They would never touch them. They consider themselves too aloof. And as you find as we move into the later editions, anything that involves two other different species occasionally doing the naughty together has sort of been pushed aside, while occasionally a novel will return and say, hey, wait a minute, I'm a writer and I'm going to talk about, strangely enough, the human condition. Except in this case, it's going to be the elf condition. And they are a bit more broad in how they approach sexual matters. But they could potentially interbreed. They might look more like each other. They might have more in common in terms of their physical organs, how those organs work, how their eyes work, how their teeth are formed. My elf teeth, for example, are not formed in the same way that humans' teeth are. And that's a question for the blog that I'm going to be posting later. Moving down. One there from Roddy Knock. In your Reichland Estates list and map, you have a tiny looking place called the Princedom of Onelreich. Yes. Is there any history behind that location with such a lofty title? It's a princedom. It has a princess that leads it. She pops up in one episode of LAWhammer. She has a lot of rights that almost no one else in Reichland has. The Emperor can't tell her what to do. She actually, strictly speaking, she swears to the Emperor, not to the Prince of Reichland, even though she's part of Reichland. Reichland can make requests of her, but they can't make any demands of her. So when, for example, the Prince of Reichland calls for state army troops, so she's allowed to do when the Reichland goes to war. So Reichland officially goes to war. He's allowed to call upon all of the prime estates, which would include, one presumes, the Princedom of Onelreich. But she has a unique position where she can basically say, fuck you, I'm keeping my troops. She's still part of Reichland, but she holds special powers that are separate to Reichland, which give her a surprisingly large amount of power. She's an absolute sovereign within her territory. Nobody can tell her what to do within it, but it's so tiny that it doesn't make a great deal of difference to imperial politics as a whole. But yeah, you can see her. She pops up in, if I can get an episode list up, I can maybe do it, because it was a special episode near Christmas where we did a special episode that discussed what happened in Ubersreich, but we did it from the perspective of what happened in the Emperor's Palace in Altdorf, and she's one of the characters that pops up. It was a story that was being told by the character in our game called Dodgy Johan, who is the advisor from Total War Warhammer. He's not called Dodgy Johan, it's just what the PCs have called him. It makes me laugh whenever they bring it up. It's about episode around about 20-ish, somewhere around there. I'm not going to fish it out now. It won't take very long. It'll take me 2 seconds to go find it. If I go to the playlist, if I pop up the first episode, switch off the sound on that because we don't need it, and if I scroll down, Doctor's Orders, Old Faces, this is when we're in Altdorf, the traitor, conflict, we need the Christmas episode, the one where the advisor is the Fall of Ubersreich, Season 1, Episode 26. So I can bring that up now, and hopefully once it eventually arrives, I'll give you a link to it if you want to go and watch it. It's sort of a standalone episode, so you can sort of watch it without having any impact upon anything else, because it has nothing to do with the core story that's going on around it. Why is it taking so long to arrive? Well, it's taking ages to arrive. I'll just go on to the next question as we go. Oh, here we go. It's arrived. Well, that's a really... let's get the share on that one, because that'll be much better. Wow, okay, that's a big long share. Control V. There you go. That's the link to that episode. Right. Blue Oyster Cultist. Given that Godzilla, wow, we're really bouncing around today. Godzilla it is, has already previously been discussed. How would you adapt Japan's other great heroes, Ultraman, Kamen Rider, into Warhammer? Many I just wouldn't, because I wouldn't want to. I would much prefer to go to historical ones. It's much like I don't try and convert, say, Doctor Who into the Empire, just because, you know, Doctor Who's strongly tied into modern British stuff, and we all know that the Empire is nothing more than a British version of the old Roman Empire from the real world, but it's very British. And I tend to avoid certain types of character, and the most modern ones, the ones I avoid, the ones that feel modern, and they do. Godzilla doesn't feel quite so modern, for all that, obviously, the whole nuclear side effect thing, but that's Godzilla is 100% Warhammer, because Godzilla is created by man and the horrors that man wreaks upon the world, and then comes back to provide some sort of, let's say, downside to using all those nasty weapons. And in the Warhammer world, that core metaphor, uranium et al., is warpstone. So Godzilla is a warpstone monster. That's what he is. It's already pretty much written for itself. The other characters don't have very clear, obvious Warhammer ties over, so I'd be less interested in doing that unless someone made a really interesting pitch for it. Benjamin Fraser. Is there any documented halfling language? Did they just speak what ogres speak until they integrated with human cultures? So, Benjamin, this is not documented. It is not marked anywhere. Indeed, just the nature of where halflings come from is also an extrapolation. It's something that we dive into again in LAWhammer. LAWhammer appears to be popping up a fair bit because LAWhammer covers a lot of really random lore that people don't generally expect. We have a bunch of tales that are set in the past during the time of Sigmar, when the halflings first arrive in the Empire. And it'll be 1,000 years before they're eventually granted their own area in the Mootland. It's an episode that starts at episode 68.1 called Enter the Dragon, which has a big picture of a very famous Miao Ying lookalike. No, it's Miao Ying sitting on the front of it. Going to episode 68.2, going into episode 68.3, so that's Into the Drakwild and The Son of Mordax. I remembered them this time. And those episodes are dealing with one character in particular recurring, a halfling called Ulf, and I had to basically make up the background that he came from, where the ogres originally came from, and had been driven out by the Cathaeans, had a deep hatred of Cathaeans because of this, had burst up against the wall that is the World's Edge Mountain, the spine of the world, got trapped on one side because of the dwarves and had been there for generations, until eventually they migrated across and arrived in the Empire. before the Empire even truly existed and were eventually accepted in the Empire, were looking to gain acceptance actually with Sigmar's new Empire. It's why he was the core character that was involved with that. The character was played by Lindsay. And the language basis that she was using at the back of her head was a deeply Eastern European style language that she was using to inflect her language. But there is no documented halfling language other than like the occasional word like Hafenlieber. But that's because Hafenlieber is the Book of Halflings. But even that is strongly influenced by classical, because that was the core written language that the Halflings first encountered when they came into the Empire. So it's got a lot of classical words in it, which is one of the reasons why there's lots of classical sounding names for many of the older Halfling characters. So sadly, no, there's nothing. But could we make one? We absolutely could. And I probably would use something that was, at least linguistically, far Middle Eastern, maybe Far Eastern Europe, somewhere over in that area, maybe Georgia, maybe Azerbaijan. I'm not sure where I'd fall back on, but somewhere in that area, and I'd start building from that. I'm building something that's relatively unique if you wish to do so. That could be super fun. Moving down to rotating potato. Rotisserie potato. Not that you need to know this, but there's a really, really nice potato spiral that you can buy from one of the restaurants here in Edinburgh that we happened to pass by for a LAWhammer get-together meet. And I got it thinking, yeah, potato spiral, who doesn't like a bit of carbs? And I ate it, and it was one of the tastiest things I'd had in my life. So spicy and so good. Anyway, rotating potato. A Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay question. How do you handle NPCs that would speak a completely different language to the PCs? Say like greenskins who have captured the party and know nothing of Reichspiel. So, multiple ways we can handle this. I have a blog online in my old blog on Blogger, which I'm going to go find as I'm talking. So I had an old blog on Blogger called LAWhammer. It's why we called the actual play that I do LAWhammer. And the blog detailed an orc encampment, and I was discussing Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay and how it could use orcs. And okay, how am I going to find my blog if it doesn't want to find it? Give me a second while I find that in the background. Stupid website. Anyway, as oh, here we go. Let me find this blog as I'm talking. And I built myself an entire group called what did I call it? White Skulls, I think. In fact, that'll make it easier to find. Give me a second while I just scroll down and look for White Skulls. Yeah, looks like it was called the White Skulls. So let me open that one up and see if I can get myself a link for that for you. And the reason that I built this the way that I did, because I built an entire tribe, was to build something fun for fantasy roleplay, show how the rules could be used in ways that you might not expect, but it was to also show that some of them could potentially speak Reichspiel, so that they could be useful in game. That is one way to resolve it. Have one of them being able to speak Reichspiel. There's an entire story up there if you want to go check it. A whole bunch of different versions of goblins. It's an old blog. I really should update it. I might transfer it over to the new LAWhammer blog over on Patreon and update it because it deserves it. Anyway, that's one way. Another way is how my friend Harry, who I have not seen for 25 years. So I used to work with Harry. Harry used to work in Games Workshop here in Edinburgh. He used to give me bike rides into work. And I was a bit of a crazy kid. And he had a motorbike and he lived right beside me. And he would give me a lift into work every day. And he purposely went out of his way to try and scare me because he thought I would be scared by being on the back of a bike. But I came from the real north of Scotland. I've been on bikes before, motorbikes that is, without license because, well, I was in the north of Scotland, for goodness sake, there's nobody up there. And I climbed cliffs and messed around with massive waves and lived in a lighthouse, and being on the back of a bike zipping along at around about 40, 50 miles an hour through the centre of Edinburgh between traffic, to me, wasn't particularly scary. I'd been on helicopters who had tried to scare me, pilots who had flown out to one of the islands of Stromar, and my father worked as a lighthouse keeper, and I'd been flown out there with him, and he had literally just gone wallop straight down and then trying to terrify me. That one worked. I had been on a sea in high storm where the wall of water to either side of my boat was so high that I couldn't see past it. Rain lashing down, and then we rode up that wave in a ship that was only, it wasn't a ship, it was a boat. It was just big enough to hold a single tractor with the front house for piloting it. Rode up that for a good 2 minutes, reached the top, and you're so high that you can see for so far, even in a storm. Then you go down the other side. Riding through Edinburgh on a bike wasn't so scary. Anyway, Harry had his own way of dealing with language, and he used one word whenever the PCs didn't know the language at hand, and that was the word blah. And he would roleplay. And he would roleplay as those characters, saying whatever those characters were saying in his head, and he would say blah. So, for example, if it was a hoity-toity person speaking in a hoity-toity language, you go, oh, blah, 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 oh, blah, blah, blah. Oh, blah, 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 blah. Or, for example, an orc, oh, blah, 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 blah. He would roleplay it because it's all too easy when you are roleplaying someone with another language to say you don't understand them and miss all of the quite obvious body language that might be being deployed. But if you role play it out as a GM, now you don't need to use blah. You can make up some random noises if you want. Or if they're a dwarf, you go, that came out almost the same. But you can use sounds if you wish to do so. But sometimes it's important to convey to the group that the character that they are interacting with has a particular mood on. They might be talking to some languid lord sitting there going, oh, blah, 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 blah. And then they say something, blah, 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 blah. Now, that's, again, just one way of dealing with it. Blah is just a quick way of saying you can't understand this. And it works pretty well. In LAWhammer, whenever I use people using different languages, I tend to make up some random noises if it's important that I convey over to the PCs what the mood of this character is, whether happy, angry, sad, because that's part of the storytelling. And if you don't tell that story and you just simply say, you can't understand what he's saying, it's a big orc. You know, he looks angry. Orcs always look angry. Are you actually saying anything useful? So sometimes it's useful actually mimicking the sort of sounds that they might be saying. Be careful, because obviously if you're straying into other people's languages and coming in with various racist stereotypes instead of coming up with something good, if you have anyone from that particular background at your table, you're almost certainly going to offend them. So don't go out for offending, unless that's the way your table likes to rock. Me personally, I prefer not to offend folk. But yeah, my general options would be either find someone who can act as a communicator for, basically a translator for the group at hand, or alternatively, if it's important that you convey the mood of the particular speakers, convey it, do it, whether it's through blah, blah, blah or something equivalent. Right, moving down. Oh, Darius, did I miss your question? Did I miss your question? Have I missed Darius's question? Okay, let's just have a quick check to see if I've missed a Darius question. Let me first check where you are, Darius, because I don't want to miss your question for obvious reasons. Yeah, you're on YouTube. I don't think I did. I hate it when I miss a question. Right, I'm just going to keep on running down relatively quickly, just to, I'm not seeing one I missed. Maybe it's not hit my side. I'm going to scroll right down to the bottom where you are right now and see if you've made a post. No, you haven't. So, Darius, pop in the thing you think I missed now, and I'll watch out for it. I'll go scroll it right after I do the next question. Now I'm just going to have to go find my place again, which was around about here. So, okay, let's try that. There's Darius. I missed a question. That obviously sucks. Apologies, Darius. I was doing my best to try not to. Moving over to Hollow. After years of searching, I finally got a physical copy of the Monstrous Arcanum myself. I was wondering if you had your own white whale that you haven't collected, be it for Warhammer or otherwise. No. I was an avid collector, and I do mean avid. I had every single Games Workshop publication that they'd made up until 2005. You name it, I had it. I also had every White Wolf publication, so everything White Wolf had ever published for all of their lines. And then I got a sewage flood, and that sewage flood swashed through my flat. There's a blog about it online, in the very blog that I posted earlier. You'll find it underneath somewhere. In fact, I'm going to post that blog because it's quite a good blog. If you want to know about the horrors of my sewage flood, I'll go find that blog as I'm answering here. And it ruined, destroyed so much of my collections. I was heartbroken at the time. I do mean properly heartbroken. House sold, is it this one? I think it's this one. Oh, look at me. There's a picture of young me there. Look at that. So let's pop this one up. House sold. I think this is the one where oh yeah, it's got a really funny story in there if you want to read a funny story. So my house was flooded. I lost 3/4 of my collection. And I was at that point working on Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, and I needed it because I was referencing it. So I started building a digital collection for all my stuff, meaning that I stopped worrying about physically owning shit. Then I got kids, and kids get in the way, and they ruin everything they touch when they're young. And I stopped worrying about physical media. I no longer care that much about physical media. I still buy all the new books because I do. I still have a very big collection because I do, but I no longer worry too much about actually physically having it because I never read them. And the only time I do read them is like if I'm referencing something I know most of it already. I tend not to collect anymore. So I don't really have a white whale anymore. I would have if you'd asked me when I wrote that blog, but I've grown out of it and no longer have that need. It used to be a strong need of mine though. Hey, before I take you up, Roddy, I'm going to go down to the bottom and see if we've had a quick ping in. No, we haven't. Interesting. Okay, so again, if I've missed a comment, I'm really not liking the idea that I've missed one of the questions here. So Darius, again, if you're still out there, post it. I'm looking out for your reply if you post it again. Anyway, moving on. Frody Knock, another question. The Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 4 starter set, good times, has an NPC described as a blessed priestess of Katya. Yes. What blessings or miracles would she have access to? Are there any sources available with details of the minor cults? I almost said something very different there. Beyond the names and domains of the gods. There are some here or there. Most of the minor goddesses and gods haven't really been detailed in any great degree. If you go to the Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 2 book, Tome of Salvation, that was a book that I wrote a long time ago. There's some of the minor cults covered in there. There's like one for a god of smuggling, for example. No, rustling. Cain gets a few miracles in there. There's a few others as well. But most of the minor gods haven't been. Now, I did one over on the LAWhammer blog. Today appears to be LAWhammer blog day. So if you're watching going, hey, Andy, you're talking about LAWhammer blog a lot. Yeah, apparently I am. This one was on the Patreon blog, and I did one for Borkbach. Borkbach is a god of lawyers, basically. And I mentioned Borkbach inside the Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay core book. And I figured it would be important to give people more of an idea of what we were thinking of when we wrote it. So I'm going to give you a link for that and then discuss Katya briefly. So here's Borkbach, the god of legalists. If you want to go read a nice little thing about one of the lesser gods of Warhammer, there you go. I might do Katya. I'm considering doing one for Katya when I've got a bit of free time. I never have free time, so it's generally when I've got so many jobs sitting that I need to take a breath before I go back to them, and I'll write something up really quickly. Borkbach was sort of that, in that I was on Discord, and we were discussing on Discord, and somebody said, what would be the Borkbach miracles? And I was like, and I very quickly did like a 5-minute post. I said, these things. And they were like, oh, right, okay, that's not quite what I was thinking. I was like, fuck it, I'm just going to write the whole thing. And then I wrote the whole thing. So that was Joe Jackson who wrote that. If you go over to that blog post, you'll see Joe Jackson's original post. I come to the council for ideas. And I just wrote the whole thing because I needed a breath because I was so deep in rookery writing at the time. I might do the same for Katya because I've got a very strong, clear idea of who Katya is because I made her up. She's actually, here's a little known fact about Katya. Katya, the goddess of disarming beauty, is based on a a character from one of my vampire games, who was called Catalina. And I didn't use her as a basis, but she was literally just a tiny Easter egg for myself, because I was in a position where I had to create a bunch of gods to fit into the Tome of Salvation. And we needed something to be effectively a goddess of beauty, a goddess of disarming beauty, a goddess of something a little bit different, and a sex positive goddess as well, and a professional sex worker positive goddess, so that we could try and break down the stereotypes of sex, it must be Slaanesh. Fuck off. No, sex is just part of the normal human condition. It does not mean it's immediately Slaanesh. Slaanesh is excess and weirdness and way beyond the norm. So breaking down those stereotypes was important, which is why Katja was added. And it was the tiniest of references to a character from one of my previous games. So yeah, I'm probably going to write that up. We've discussed it a bit in LAWhammer. There's been a priestess of Katja. Did we bring her to screen? It's in a lost episode that we're re-recording. Hey, Fraudy, I'm going to, when that episode go back up, it's episode 14.2, something like that. And we've got a lost episode where we have a priestess of Katja in it. So I will speak to Lindsay, because she was the character in that one for re-recording. So I'll re-record it and then give you a ping, so you're aware that it's there, assuming that you're in Discord. All right, moving down. I'm going to go right back to the bottom again to check if we've had a ping in. Oh, we haven't had a ping in. Oh, no, I'm really not liking the idea that I might have missed a comment from Darius. So I'm going to check one more time for a Darius comment, because apparently I missed it. Oh, I don't see it. Oh, I hate missing a comment. Oh, Darius, I am upset. Right, let's just move on. Okay, scrolling down, we just had ourselves our nice big Fraudy Knock one, which was that one. Yep. Okay, which means we go down to Teo Benora. Following up. Then are the different species of the old world imported by the old ones and or immigrants from other planets? Great question. Really good question, because we have some form of an answer for some of this. Humans are indigenous. We know this because there are multiple examples in lore of humans being uplifted and humans seeing the ships arriving for the first time. Orcs are immigrants from another planet. They came with the old ones. And depending upon the story, it was just some spores that got into one of their ship that then came out, or it was a bunch of orcs that just happened to be sitting in the back of a great silver old one ship, hiding away, going horror, not being spotted somehow. Depends on the story you go with. The old world went with a more of a stowaway option, where if we go back to 8th edition, it was spores. If we go to elves are generally described as being uplifted, but there's very little description as to whether they were brought in or not. If we go to, say, for example, the lizardmen, most of them are uplifted, but it looks like the Slan might be an import, as in they came from a completely different world. There's different versions of that story. Sometimes they are uplifted, sometimes they come from another world. But broadly, the assumed situation is that they all were uplifted indigenous species. So the old ones fucked about with their DNA and turned them into something else. There is something, however, that slightly contradicts that. And that's that almost all of the species of the Warhammer world that we have that were indigenous were either human, Vimmer, or megafauna, like really big things, massive creatures. And there doesn't have to be many stories of pre-cataclysm species before the old ones arrived. So we could build easy stories for all of them coming from just DNA banks that are brought in by the old ones. If you wish to do that, it's entirely up to you. But loosely, are there different species in the world imported by the old ones? Yes, some are. Definitely some are. Or immigrants from other planets? Some are. But we can't be certain exactly which ones were or were not. Alrighty, moving down. The bloke person. Hey, the bloke person. Speaking of language, my Bretonian knight has learned Drew here. Is it a dialect of Eltharine or a separate language? It's mostly a separate language. If you take a look at Drew here and how it manifests, it doesn't have all the same. In fact, it's got a completely different set of rune sounds to how Eltharine, whether it's Fire Eltharine, Tar Eltharine, is represented. It's more in common with Anaquaean, which is the root of Eltharine, than it does with Eltharine. So it seems to be two languages with a shared root. So what I would suggest is, if you're looking to try and figure it out, think of it a little bit like in Europe, we've got various core languages that really influence many things, like, the Latin languages all coming from Latin and how they all moved in different directions. Some are almost mutually intelligible, very similar to each other. Some are basically the same language, but for political reasons, they've been renamed into different things. Others are vastly different, even though they have come from similar sources. For example, if we go over to Romania and Romanian is a Latin language, which surprises many people who are not Romanian, and has a surprising number of words that when you look at it, you go, oh, wow, that's really similar to the Italian or the Spanish word. But it all sounds a bit different because it's strongly influenced by everything that's over there. It's not mutually intelligible with, say, something like Spanish. But you take Spanish and Portuguese, two of those together. I know many Spanish people who can speak Portuguese almost. Portuguese can speak Spanish people almost without an enormous amount of lessons. They're not mutually intelligible completely. I speak neither, so trust me when I say I am speaking with no authority here. But there's definitely enough similarities there that can often pick things apart. Italian sitting on the edge, French in a slightly different place. It's a little bit more like that. Drew here is in its own place. Now, if you want to justify that within your Warhammer world, it's super easy. It's the dialects of Nagaraith, which formed the core language that moved on. And Nagaraith spoke a different language to the other kingdoms that were inside Ulthuan at that time. And those different dialects and languages have, over the course of time, had some linguistic drift. Linguistic drift happens within generations as well as over the long course of time. I speak a different language to the language that I spoke when I was in my, say, teens. I say loads of words that I never used back then. Loads of them. I also pronounce many words very differently because of where I grew up. I had a very different accent to the one that I have now. But on top of that, I have been both educated by my kids with new words and a whole bunch of other things that lead me into a different linguistic place. And somewhat similarly, the elves, even if they're really old and they spoke this old version of the language, they are still nevertheless carrying on, and the linguistic drift of their language over time is developing, like all languages do. So even Malaria and Malekith, who you might say, well, they would be a custodian of the old forms, and surely the language would never move, to a degree. But language nevertheless still evolves all the time. So loosely speaking, Drew here is probably Nagaraith's dialect of not Eltharine, but of their language that came from Anaquaean. Okay, moving down. I'm going to go check to see if Marius came back in again, or if I'm just going to have to give up. I'm just going to have to give up. Sorry, Marius. It looks like I missed your question. I feel absolutely awful. We'll make sure that we catch that at some point later. Oh, someone else has brought up Meow. Oh, you're the best, Meow. Generally, when you write Warhammer, how miserable you make it. I think it should be miserable, but not too much, in which the average person still has a life. This is something I have exceedingly strong opinions on. Not even slightly strong opinions, exceedingly strong. You can't be miserable if everything's miserable. Now, you might go, no, that means I'm miserable. Yeah, but you don't know that you're miserable, because that's normal. The only way for something to be miserable is for something to contrast against it. Which means that if you write Warhammer with nobody having what appears to be a good life, you failed, because all of your attempts to make the misery shine through won't shine through, because there's nothing to contrast it against. It's one of the reasons why humor is such a core component of Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. Humor is written in through many aspects of it, particularly in the 4th edition, particularly in the 1st edition. It's a core component of what we were trying to build for the 4th. 2nd edition was much more po-faced, and because of that, it made it harder to make the horror happen. Why is that? Because horror works at its best when you can compare it to not horror. And it sometimes works even better when you compare it to something that's so not horrific that you're smiling about it. And when the horror comes, it hits all the harder as you swing wildly from an amusing situation to a truly terrible one. I would say this is almost a core component of how we pitch LAWhammer, where we sometimes have some tonal whiplash as we move from really ridiculous situations to truly horrific ones that like people going, ah! But the only reason that they're going, is because everything seemed okay just a few moments ago. If everything feels like, people stop reacting. They're like, oh, it's another horrible thing coming across the horizon. Yeah, okay, so it's got long claws, does it? Yeah, so did the last thing. Oh, they're bleeding this time, gotcha. Well, the last one was covered in grisly guts, so, I mean, they were effectively bleeding anyway. Oh, its eyes are big and nasty. Gotcha. Yeah, I suppose that's different to the shrewd eyes the last one had that were really squinty and were gauging everyone and judging them whenever they looked in a particular direction. If everything is grim and dark, nothing is grim and dark. To write true grim dark, you need to have some form of release to ensure that that grim dark can itself live. So, how miserable do you make it? Pretty fucking miserable. But you don't only make it miserable. That's generally what I would suggest. The average life for the average person is not necessarily a particularly good lot, but it's not necessarily that bad depending on where they live. It's not necessarily good at all. It could be literally awful by what we would consider standards. But their life is their life. It's what they live in. It's their norm. And to get something miserable for them, it would need to go beyond the misery that you've described to be something truly awful. But broadly speaking, contrasts are absolutely important. Thanks very much for bringing that one up, Mihao. You rock. And I obviously missed it earlier when you probably posted before because you then posted immediately again. Are you killing me? Sorry, missed that one. Let's move on quickly to rotating potato. I'm thinking of rotisserie potato again. Might be a big question, but when you start world building for a fresh faction like Kislev, yep, what's the general flow you follow? Like, how do you decide what aspects of the faction to cover, and how would you handle something like Ind, Stali, etc. on a surface level? Holy shit, that's a big question, rotating potato. And I do mean that's a huge question, world building question. Right, so I'm going to answer this in two ways. Number one is going to be the answer that is going to be a bit skimmy, and I'll run through it quickly, and it'll take like about 2-3 minutes. Number two is that I do a bunch of masterclasses over on the Rookery. Rookery Publications has got its own little Patreon off on the side where we speak to people from across the games industries every single week, and we do a big chat with them. We pop up for free every single Saturday. It's just an hour's chat. It's always fun. Last week we had Stu Goff discussing, and last week, that was yesterday. Yesterday we had Stu Goff discussing how to interweave myth with history to create mythic histories, because he'd done that in one of his games. Super awesome. And I do masterclasses. My next set of masterclasses are going to be on GMing. And, well, not specifically GMing. They're going to be on campaign building and how to build your own campaign. Some of that will involve building your own setting too. I'm going to be doing probably 3. It's currently planned to be 3 masterclasses in a row before the end of the year, where we're going to be doing that. If you want to know more about our masterclasses, I'll be posting up about that over on the Rookery side sometime next week. In fact, the dates for them go up next Saturday. So I'll almost certainly be sharing it over in Discord. So watch out for whatever shit I share in Discord, because it'll almost certainly pop up there. And I've done world building discussions before in the past. In fact, there's entire Rookery discussions about world building with people who do this for a living. So all of that is to say, go check the Rookery, because we do this a lot. But beyond that, when it came to Kislev, it was really easy, because it wasn't so much what do we build for Kislev, it's what has been built for Kislev and what do we want to do next. And my goal was to get all of the writers involved in the Kislev project, which was me, Graham McNeil, Steve D, and was it David Sharp? David Sharp. I think it was David Sharp. If I got that wrong, I'm pretty sure David Chart did Erengrad. And it was to take all of them. Let me fix my camera there. There we go. It was to take all of them and get them all to agree that we're going to build basically the same thing, which was the setting that Games Workshop was currently using. But that's a bit difficult because Kislev had one version that was presented in Something Rotten in Kislev, which was very old. Had another version that was presented in Mordheim, where we got things like the Streltsy, for example. They came from Mordheim. It had another version that had been presented in things like Riders of the Dead. So this is where Dan Abnett had done a tour across Kislev and discussed the rotas of different Kislev troops. There's a lot in that book. and different parts of Kislev being discussed. We had Gotrek and Felix, who had passed through Kislev more than once and presented a very different feel of Kislev. We also had the Ambassador Chronicles from Graham McNeil, which presented yet another version of Kislev. And on top of all of that, we had Gav Thorpe's army list for Kislev for Warhammer Fantasy Battle 6th edition, which presented yet another version. We had all of those to combine and create into something new. And my goal was to do that, where others had different goals, where they all wanted to either create something new and make it their own, or alternatively make something old and just stick to that. Graham McNeil wanted to stick to exactly what the studio had built for Kislev, and that 100% made sense. Where Steve Darlington wanted to add a whole bunch of new things like fire spirits for Daz, and some new bits and pieces for the various gods of Kislev. I was in the job of consolidating it all and making it work. So the parts of the book that I took over were all of the rule writing to make sure that the rules made sense. So I did all of the rules in that book. I did all of the builds for the Ice Witches and the Hag Witches, because I knew the setting arguably better on the magic side than anybody else. So I took over all of that. And then I wrote all of their sections that involved witches or anything like that, so that they all spoke with one voice. But beyond that, for Kislev, it was a matter of consolidating all of the material that was there and making it make sense. And that was just a bunch of emails that were fired out amongst us, as we all made decisions as to which things would be included and which things were considered to be old, outdated, and would not be included. Once we had a base level, we were off. It was a different style of situation than you might find for your typical world building endeavor, because there was 4 of us working on it, and a lot of world building had already been done. There was, however, a couple of questions that hadn't been answered, and one of the big ones was magic and how they should be presented. The Ice Queen of Kislev had by that point had just enough lore that suggested that the Ice Shamans of Kislev that had been presented all the way back in the 4th edition of Warhammer Fantasy Battle, where the Ice Witches there were not just female, they were male and female, and that had been ported over into the computer game. So if you moved over to Shadow the Horned Rat, Dark Omen, there's an Ice Witch in that, and he's a big burly bloke. And there was a question of, do we just stick with the Ice Witch route and develop that? Or alternatively, do we use Ice Witches being male and female? Or do we have the potential of males, but they're getting culled for one reason or another? And that wasn't a decision that we could make, because it's not our world. So when we're doing things like this, it's not just simply we create cool shit. What we do is we ask questions as well. We ask questions of the owner of the IP, in this case, Games Workshop. And in this case, I went to Games Workshop because I was the one responsible for writing these bits. And I said, look, we have conflicting versions of Ice Witches. I think this is the one that we should go with. And this is why. These are the sources. Do you agree? Or would you like me to go in a different direction? And then we negotiate a final point, and then I write it. And that's what I did. And that's how we got the Ice Witches that we got today. The entire Ice Sisterhood, the Ice Court, all the rest of it, all came from that conversation. But that's very, 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 very different to be in a position where you are, for example, creating your own version of Ind or Estalia and bring it up. Estalia, maybe not. There's a lot written about Estalia, but Ind, there's almost nothing written about Ind. It's like a tiny paragraph here, a magic item over there, a few bits over in Total War. But beyond that, you can almost go wild. And that's where you're doing something very different. Now, obviously, I haven't mentioned the Kislev side, looking into the various real world cultures that are potentially there and deciding if there's anything to port over, but we can discuss that loosely on the Ind and Estalia side. And I'm just going to say, you do a lot of research and you bring in people involved. So for example, when it came to Kislev at the time, I had someone who was involved with the Russian translation that I was talking to, and I had a bunch of Polish fans that I was talking to as well. And they provided a whole host of insights into some of the things that I did. If I was doing something like, say, Ind, I would not be happy unless I had at least 4 or 5 strong experts on India with me. And also 4 or 5 people who just lived in India, who'd be willing to just sit down with me and give me their views on what India is like, so we can then build something that feels like a really good Warhammer version. Would I just do it through research online? No. No. I'd fuck it up. I'd fuck it up bad. But I'd be researching with people who actually know their stuff, building the cool shit with them. And then once we built that cool shit, I'd build it all up. But there's so much involved with that I can't really get into it in a small comment and ask me anything. It's more of a rookery thing where we go into world building and step-by-step processes for how to take an idea from concept all the way through to execution. That's something that we do in our various masterclasses over there. So I will probably leave it for that side. So moving down. Right. Getting evil. Are gnomes psychologically the most human race? Not really. No. No. Gnomes are one of the most underwritten species inside Warhammer. They only have like 5 pages in their modern version. And I wrote those. So there's very little about gnomes inside the official lore as it currently stands. Are they human? No. But one of the jobs when you're writing a piece like that is to make them as playable as possible with what you offer. Now, it was basically an intro to gnomes. And I wanted to build something that was accessible, simple, and gave you everything you needed. Enough history to understand who they were. Enough background to be able to play one. Enough new material that you could play almost any career with them. Enough discussion of their gods that you could go, oh, that's their core gods and that's how they work. That's a lot to do in just 5 pages. And I kind of nailed it. This isn't a blow my own trumpet moment. This is just I did everything I needed to do. I had a brief that I built myself. I sent it off to Games Workshop, fully expecting them to go, wow, okay, maybe not. And they did the opposite. They were like, I can't believe you've taken something that we discussed and turned it into something that actually works. Because there was quite a lot of discussion as to whether they could even work at all. The goal was to then do another article about the gnomes in a later book. I was going to be doing one about Glimdwaro, and Glimdwaro was going to basically speak about their culture and who they were as a people, and it was going to go beyond the obvious discussions, and it would have just literally pointed out gnomes aren't human. They have a very different way of working, but that never got written. So gnomes are whatever you want them to be because there's very little written about them out there. Okay. Apparently, oh no. I really wish I hadn't brought your comment up because I'm now going to have to pronounce your name. All right, I'm Scottish. This is going to be a complete hack job. So it's Kaylee. Hey, is that an X or is that a sh? It depends on where in the world you're from. I don't know. It could be Teshira. It could be Tezira. Tizira. Too many different ways to pronounce that. Apologies. Do drop in a pronunciation phonetic guide if you wish to the comments. I've been trying to convince Sotek to do a Palace of Slanesh in the 6 Circle stream to celebrate Tides of Torment. Maybe you convince Amanda. Yeah, I probably can. Because I think that might be a good idea. In fact, I'm going to write that one down just so that I bring it up with him when we're doing our discussions. Because I think it's a relatively natural fit. Let's do that. Cool. Okay, that's added to my notes. Let's move down a bit further as I bemoan the fact that I can't speak hardly any languages out there. Yeah, Richard knowing Romanian is in the name, but most people don't really realize that the Romans got so far up there, had such a deep influence, and Romania up there carries so much of their DNA in their language. Beerval, who are the House of Krieglitz? There's like no info on them, and where's Krieglitz itself? Archives mentions it's in the capital of Talbot land, with zero indication of where it could even be. It's on one of my maps. Right, let me. It's going to be another LAWhammer reference, I'm sorry to say. As I go over here, pretty sure I have placed it on. You're going to find it on, I think, the Midland map. Now, it might sound ridiculous because Midland's fucking miles away from there, but it's got an Empire map on it. I'm pretty sure. Oh, I didn't mark the capital, did I? God fucking damn it. I mean, I sort of did. I am going to have to do a new map for that so that you can actually see it. It's sort of there. It's on the Dunkel Coast. The Dunkel Coast was added by a computer game. It's one of the provinces of the Empire in the north of Talabicland, and Krieglitz is up there. It's in the very north of Talabicland to the west, to the east of the crater on the River Talabek. And the House of Krieglitz is there. But yeah, it's not actually marked properly on this map, so I will. I mean, it sort of is. It's sort of there. I mean, it's. I mean, I'm going to give you the map anyway. I mean, it can't hurt, can it? Let me just quickly. I've got lost in Borkbach again. Let me just get the correct one. So, if we go to the Middenland map that's online in the Middenland political stretch. Here we go. I'm going to pass it all over to you now. Control C, Control V. If you go to that link that I've just posted, it should be arriving you any moment. You'll find that's the Middenland political sketch. And in the top left-hand corner of the Middenland political sketch, there is a map of the Empire as a whole. Now, this map is a map from 2512. That's the year inside the Empire, where politics are very different to what they'll be later, where we have provinces like Talabicland and Talabheim as a province, and Talabheim rules Hochland. It's why Hochland is not marked with like big heavy letters. It's just marked with tiny little letters that say Hochland just above Talabheim. It's ruled by Talabheim. Talabicland is ruled from Krieglitz, and you'll see that there's a place called the Dunkelkust. I'm pronouncing it terribly, Dunkelkust. Just north of, or just above, pardon me, the Talabicland word right in the very center of that map. And just above that, you see a little Imperial cross. That is Krieglitz. And yeah. House of Krieglitz, very briefly described inside the enemy in Shadow's Companion, where you can find out the House of Krieglitz there. Very, very small amount, just saying who's the leader and who their heir are, as I recall. There you go, there's a little bit of detail for you. Sarmelian, is there any faction in dire need of new art? So many. Yeah, if I was to pull out one, it would be the Aeonir. The Aeonir have been woefully misunderstood and turned into just almost Azrai Wood Elves, which is not great. They could really do with a really nice piece of art to make them something new and interesting and exciting. Overall, all of the Empire has turned into just one faction rather than being lots of different factions. So ethnic differences for the Empire is sorely needed. I would love to see that. If we're looking at the overall factions as a whole, the Bretonnians have fallen so far behind that they could do with a proper upgrade. If you take a look at the old world and what it released for its version of Bretonnia, it's pretty much all old art, saying basically that Bretonnia hasn't changed for 200 years, and the same art is used in that book as was used for Bretonnia 200 years later. If anyone needed an update, it's Bretonnia. So hopefully that answers that. Moving down to the bloat person. I mean to ask, Andrew here, does it need perfect pitch? Yes. Yeah. So yeah, if we're just talking about what is the language, it is a complicated elven language like Eltharine, and it requires a deeper understanding of sound than most human languages offer. Perfect pitch is a base requirement to even get going. It is a proper difficult language, and human is never going to be able to pass as a native speaker, ever. They're just never going to be able to modulate their throat in the same ways. They're physically built differently to elves. Elven throats can make noises that human throats can't, meaning that your Drew here will almost always be something that someone goes, "You're murdering my language." And if you have listened to anybody speak a foreign language they're not very good at, that will probably be you at maximum advances in that language because you're incapable of enunciating some of the sounds. And that's even with perfect pitch. Eltharine is somewhat similar. Having said that, there are examples of individuals who can speak Eltharine Drew here passingly well. Certainly well enough that it doesn't cause the elves in question to cringe too much. And I'm cool with that. And if that's how you want your game to go, go wild with it. My own personal game, you're never going to get there unless there's something special happening, that you're a mutant and your throat's different, or alternatively you are just a genius with sound for one reason or another and can emulate certain sounds in a fashion that most people can't. That suggests you'd also require the mimic talent. If without the mimic talent and the perfect pitch talent, you're probably screwed. But if you get both of those talents, I'd say you're definitely in a place where you could start pinning it down relatively well. Necromancer Kobold, in reference to my suggestion from the last stream, after hiring someone from the region, how would you go about adapting Haladin into Warhammer World? I would sit down with the person at hand, possibly even a small group of people. That's generally my preference. And we would go through the process of blue sky thinking. As we know, idea is bad. We have at this point already read all of the core sources. We all know them. I am, in this particular meeting, the Warhammer expert. I am the person who knows Warhammer. They are the people who know their culture. They are the people who can articulate to me stuff I'd never consider, because if I just read stuff online, I wouldn't know all the stories that have been passed down hand to mouth, generation to generation, or local stories that never hit the internet. I know more about random bullshit facts from the north of Scotland than most books offer, because most books don't go into all the stuff that the kids are talking about the local ghost stories, about the local spirits, about the witch that lives in a particular place. That's the shit that I grew up with, but it's not in most books. In a similar fashion, I'd be wanting that sort of cultural detail, those sort of childhood details that I just wouldn't have, stuff that your grandmother had said about a particular thing. I'd want all of that in people's minds so that they can discuss it out and then effectively do the Warhammer job, which is dial it up to 11 and make it match what Warhammer offers. Warhammer has 8 winds of magic. Warhammer has a different magical setup. Warhammer already has genie of various types. How do we use that? And I'd be discussing and asking questions. What do you think are the best ideas? What can we do to make this work? And those ideas would slowly percolate into something cool. We wouldn't want too many ideas. We'd want like everyone to offer like 3 or 4 ideas. We'd all look at them and see which ones we thought were coolest. And when we'd start detailing those ideas out. Now, if you want to see this in practice, I can actually give you an idea of someone who's done this online. Go to Rookery Publications on YouTube. And if you want to see collaborative world building going live, I say they because I wasn't in this stream. But this set of streams is really good. It's a set of streams with Tom Toner. It's the EU World Building Extreme World Building Workshop, and he does. Let me see if I can find it. I'm gonna have to go to past streams. I'll go to the first one. He's done 2 of them so far, and I believe that an EU Part 3 is coming. The first one is here. You can hear the countdown music running as I grab the link for it. That is an example of collaborative world building. And this was done live, much like we're doing a live discussion right now. This was done live with the audience that were watching when they did it. So Tom was there with Andy and Lindsay, and they just built a whole bunch of cool shit. Now, this isn't built with a goal in mind, as in we're trying to adapt Aladdin or something similar, but it sort of is. They were building an exoplanet. It's the same idea. Watch it. I think it's really quite fun. That's one. I'll get you the links for both of the ones that are done, actually. So if you want to watch both of them, you can. And if I remember, I will add it to the video description afterwards. Here's EU Part 2 as the music runs out. Electric Boogaloo. There we go. Hopefully that'll give you at least a bit of an idea. Moving by a quick what if. What if during the Cataclysm there was a green screen leader who could bring a titanic wow like Grom or Grimgors or Face Flayers? I think that's almost certainly the case, Tiball. I think this isn't really a what if. This is more of a let's build, because this probably happened. Right, so running down, let me see, let me just double check I'm not missing any here, because I don't want another Darius situation, which was bluntly awful. Oh, have I caught up? Carlos! Okay, so I've apparently caught up, so I'm going to dive into some random questions that are already out there from others. Is there a Sinbad character out there? No, not really, because, hey, who really touches those legends? Because they haven't, which I think is almost hilarious given how much they were an influence for most of the writers of Warhammer at the time, when you consider the many movies that they were watching from that depicted that particular era. Hollywood versions, of course, but hey, that's just the way that it is. Krieglitz is not Kuzel per se. I'll cover that in another one over on that one. Let's just run through ones. I'm going to go relatively quickly. Besides being a stereotype, no, you're speaking to each other. That's not me. I want one at Lorebeards. Here we go. Also, Andy, what do you think of Elcat's games? Love them. Rogue Trader, love them. Upcoming Dark Heresy, looking forward to them. They did a fantasy one. Would you like to see Enemy Within or New Story? New Story. Enemy Within's done. You can play the Enemy Within, much like I would like them to do their own new story. And I would be exceedingly pleased to see that occur. A lot of work went into building new versions of Warhammer, so it's nice to see that that might occur. I mean, if it does occur, that'd be awesome. If they decided that they want to reach out and chat to me, I'd chat to them. You know me, I'll talk to anyone. In fact, I was about to say something I can't because I'm NDA'd. Fuck. It's not about a computer game, just in case you're asking. But it's about something I was about to mention because I'm an idiot. Here's another at LAWhammer. Conquesting knights travel in groups. Yes. Are there arrogant royal types who do it wrong? For example, with retinue, tents, because they're used to luxury. Yes. There's all types of humans. They all do it in different ways. There is no specific right way because the black and white language that we have inside an army list that says they all do this is the top tier. But as you move down into the complexities, there's different beliefs in different parts of Bretonnia. Bretonnia is huge, and there is not a single consistent vision as to how these things are done. So the answer is, broadly speaking, on most of these, yes. And the question you were referencing there was from Carlos. Hey, Andy. Hello. Any roleplay tips on taking on a Grail quest? I know it's different from all knights, but do the virtues affect how a knight should behave, or is it being good and strong in general? Wow, Carlos, that's a toughie. That's a toughie because it's such a complicated, big question, because Grail quests are such personal things. They're about almost overcoming yourself to prove that you are worthy of eventually finding the Grail. And those who are strong and will need to confront the potential brittleness that comes with it. Those who are proud will need to confront the dangers of that pride. Those who are weak will need to show their strength. There's all sorts of different ways that it can manifest. Even their vows that they take are not, they're like all vows. We take them and we hope that they stick, but they don't necessarily. Our virtues, oh, there's so many things I could discuss. Loosely speaking, I would actually say this is personal and down to how you want to build it for your own games. I would be looking to, this is a campaign, the whole campaign. So in many respects, you're asking, how should I write a campaign? And that's a big one, but also one that I'm sort of tackling inside the Rookery, where I'm doing campaign building for my next 3 masterclasses. It's not directly related, but I will mention them again because I'm quite looking forward to doing those masterclasses because I'm building on them just now. But loosely, how should the knight behave? That's a question that's almost impossible to answer because every knight is different. It's not just about being good and strong. Some of them are not good, but they succeed with the Grail. Some of them are not strong, at least not strong in a physical sense. They're strong in different ways, and they find the Grail. There's so many different tales that you can tell. The most important one I would probably consider is how do they overcome who they are? What do they do? And through the process of doing that, why does the lady mark out their deed as worthwhile and worthy of receiving the Grail? It's an interesting question. One that I fear that have I missed another one? Okay, I'm really happy you're checking that for me. I missed Elemental Exposure, Super Chat, Andy. Starts this way. How would Derby Society deal with IDD dwarves? Working on a dwarf Eng character that should take the Slayer Oath after Malaka. Is there more? I feel like I'm missing something here, Mihao. More. That LAWhammer for writing a comment, or Andy will ignore it. So true. It's a rule made during the HC. Yeah, 100%. Right, before I answer that, this made my day. Thanks, Andy. I'm not sure I was that useful, but sure, if it made your day, yay! I'm glad. Meow. So, first, I'm going to do. Well, let me check this one again. How would Davi say I deal with IDD dwarves working on a dwarf engineer character? There we go. That would take the Slayer Oath after a Malachi style mistake. Gotcha. But can't, because then there would be none left to take care. It can't. But can't. Can't is an interesting word for dwarfs. Can't. So, I know I'm dwelling on this for a bit. Can't. There is no such thing as can't. There is only do or do not, to quote Yoda. And when it comes to your honor, there is only one answer. Do. That's it. Do. Apparently there's more. What's that? More? Andy, there's more? There's more. Is that more to the comment? And if so, how the frick am I missing it? Is my comment's not coming in quite right there? Is there more to this particular comment? Today, I'm going to presume can't take care of anything. As it currently stands, this question here, it sounds like they would take the Slayer Oath. I can't see any reason why they wouldn't. If there's more to this one, Mihao, I would like to see it. But take the Slayer Oath. I'm seeing nothing here. Okay, so wait a minute. First, of his IDD brother, if he's dead. Okay, so what are we saying here? Am I missing some detail here? How did Davi say I did deal with the dwarfs working on a dwarf engineer? I can't see why he wouldn't take the Slayer Oath. Am I missing something? Please explain it if I've just missed a fact here that I'm not quite grasping. But I think he would take the Slayer Oath. I might be getting some weird delay in chat here and I'm not seeing things popping up quite clearly. In fact, somebody's just said that. I think there's a delay in the chat. Oh, it's you, Mia. I think there very possibly is. And I'm possibly not getting the stuff through. I can't see why he wouldn't take the Slayer Oath in this particular case. If you've got a nice clean explanation, please just tap it out. It doesn't matter. I mean, no, it doesn't matter, Dragon Knight. He would still take the oath. His honor is gone, and dwarves are absolute in so many ways. There is no easy way out. Sadly, the takeaway is if you take the oath, even if you have other duties, that is the takeaway, and it sucks. Being a dwarf kind of sucks. Yeah, I as far as I can tell, from that back and forth, I'm not entirely sure I've caught all of, because I appear to have maybe a slight issue with my comments coming in. He is screwed royally and probably hates himself as much as anyone who takes the Slayer Oath does. Everyone hates the Slayer Oath. Everyone hates what it represents and the fact they have to take it. Everyone hates themselves for what they have to walk away from. You've got to remember that every dwarf has got their things that they have to do, all of them. Every single last one has responsibilities to their clan, to their family, to their peers. All of them do. Every single one of them. And when their honor is lost, they take that oath and their hearts break. They're broken. There is no thing that will stop them from taking that oath just because, there's a thing there's always a thing. Dwarves aren't quite really built that way, unless possibly they're Norse dwarves who might take things differently. I think that's a nice one. Cool. Okay, so Niesgard, I did answer your question. My answer was, we'll answer that in Hunter's one. I presume that's what in fact you've brought up. Oh, well, my comments are coming in a weird order there. he wasn't able to find it in the Hunter stream. Please repeat it here. No, I was quite happy just taking it up in the Hunter stream. And my comments do look like they're coming in a slightly odd order here. It looks like YouTube is having an issue. It seems to be only a YouTube issue, though. Yeah. I think we've reached a natural conclusion there, unless somebody throws a question right at the very end here. I'd like to say a few things. Number one, we will be doing our Witch Hunters next Sunday. It was obviously meant to be done today, and that didn't happen. But next Sunday, we'll be picking up Witch Hunters, and it might not go down the route you expect. Both Sotek and I have things that we want to discuss concerning Witch Hunters and everyone's view of who they are and how they came to be. That should be fun. So that's Witch Hunters. We also have a stream this Wednesday. I don't think we've pinned that one down. No, we were going to do it after this episode, so I'm going to have to message Sotek. I'll wait till tomorrow because he's not feeling well today. But yeah, we need to sort out a stream for tomorrow as well. No, tomorrow, pardon me, Wednesday as well. Beyond that, LAWhammer will be live this Friday as well, where we are possibly changing tracks. We'll see how it goes. I'm looking at it. Did I miss a... Oh, god damn. There's always... If I miss one, I will wait. I think you missed a Twitch cheer or I missed it. God damn it, Blueface. If I missed one, I refuse. I'm going to go back, Blueface. You should be easy to spot because there are far fewer... oh, there we go. You missed it again. So that one came in late, Mr. Blueface. So let me just go... Yep, definitely there. I think I don't think it's... I think I have a StreamYard issue because some of these comments weren't here before. I would normally just refresh out, but because there's no one else here, I don't want to do it. So I'm just going to keep on going back until I find this comment. There it is. Hey, Miss Blueface. If you had to think of a fifth Chaos God brother, what would it look like? Maybe a stream idea if you didn't do it already. So there's already more than 4. So we don't really need to think of one. We've got Be'lakor almost in that spot already. We also have a variety of other Chaos Gods. If you check our Ranking the Chaos Gods stream, you'll get a pretty good idea. And apologies for missing this one, Mr. Blueface. I do actually have a problem with my question streaming in. I wouldn't, but I would add lots of others, and I definitely wouldn't do a brother because hell, we've already gone too much on that front already. I wouldn't want to mix up the 5 chaos powers. I definitely wouldn't want to be add the Horned Rat to that. That is an Age of Sigmar thing. Leave it for Age of Sigmar. Let's give Age of Sigmar its thing and leave Warhammer with its own thing. But I would happily create lots of other Chaos Gods, the Hashuts of the world. I'd definitely be quite keen to play with those. That would be super, super fun. Okay, now, before I run off, let's just double check that I haven't missed anything else. And also, thank you there, Bloom Bleu, for reposting that question, but I did find it, thankfully. Okay, is there anything else I hear? Yes, gathered, and again, he would leave it to his clan to deal with. That's the clan's problem now. It's no longer his, no matter how much he wanted it to be his. Monitoring Crescent, I will save questions for future streams. Coming in late. Have a good day. Thank you very much, Monitoring Crescent. Appreciated it. So, with all of that said, thanks all for turning up. I'm going to sign off. We will see you on Wednesday, if not before. And do be aware, if we're lucky, this week, things should change over in the Lorebeards YouTube channel, meaning that we'll be doing a bunch of other things. But it might not happen this week. We're reliant on YouTube doing stuff at their end, which is just basically us waiting for them to pull their finger out. So hopefully we'll have some interesting news. And if you haven't done so already, make sure you drop by our Discord channel. I will drop the link for our Discord channel one more time because I can before I run off, because you might not have actually joined us yet. And if you haven't, seriously, why not get into our channel? Let me just grab the code here and post it for you all and say thanks very much. You all rock. Until next time. Goodbye.